I think my coworker may have an affair with my wife, and it's looking like it may be true. I'm a 36-year-old man, and in 2014, I had a chance encounter with my now wife, who is 32 years old, at a local mall. Let's call her Gabby. Gabby was waiting in line at the food court when I first laid eyes on her. Interestingly, I had initially intended to dine at a different restaurant, but the line there was too long. So I joined the line at the restaurant where Gabby was standing. When our eyes met, I was taken aback by how stunning she looked. Upon seeing me, Gabby chuckled and explained that she wasn't in line for food. She mentioned that her cousin worked at the restaurant, and she was simply waiting for her cousin to finish her shift. I was overjoyed that she spoke to me because I was struggling to come up with something to say. Thanks to her friendly approach, I managed to break the ice with humor, and we engaged in conversation while she awaited her cousin. It was clear that I was leaving a positive first impression on her. As she waited for her cousin, I offered to buy her some food, but Gabby expressed a preference for a strawberry lemonade instead. I purchased it for her, and our conversation continued, with me maintaining a playful and humorous demeanor. When her cousin eventually emerged, I took the opportunity to ask for Gabby's phone number, and she gladly shared it with me before they left. From that point on, I made every effort to sweep her off her feet. After going on several dates, attending events, and socializing with her and my friends alongside her friends, we officially became a couple. In 2017, Gabby and I tied the knot, and as time went by, we became parents to 3 wonderful kids. We have 2 daughters, and our son is in the middle. Over the years, we've grown into being excellent parents for our children. It hasn't been easy, but we made the choice to cut back on going out to clubs and concerts, though we still managed to find occasional moments of fun. Our nightlife definitely took a back seat. I've always felt fortunate to have Gabby as my wife. Her personality is fantastic, and her stunning looks even earned me compliments from my friends. Gabby is of Cuban descent, and her appearance is a mix between the actress who portrayed Wonder Woman and Salma Hayek. She has a curvaceous figure, arm tattoos, and is known for her signature ponytail, especially in her selfies. Financially, we're in a comfortable position. I work as a maintenance man, and Gabby, along with her sister, works as interior decorators, which brings in good income. Her sister is the interior designer, and Gabby joined the profession when she saw its success. I've been dedicated to my job for 7 years. Little did I expect that someone from my workplace would cause trouble in my marriage. The issue started last Wednesday. There's a guy in the shipping department. Let's call him Daryl. While we're not close friends, I consider him an acquaintance, and we occasionally chat during lunch breaks. The most time I've spent with him was probably when we played dice in the parking lot at work. Our interactions mainly revolve around basketball discussions during lunch. One weekend, my car had brake issues, preventing me from driving to work. So my wife graciously offered to drop me off and pick me up after my shift. The first time she came a bit early and had to wait around 30 minutes for me to finish. During that time, she struck up a conversation with Daryl, a coworker, and another colleague I'll call Brianna. After introducing her as my wife, we engaged in some casual chit-chat before heading home. Looking back, that moment might have been the starting point of it all. I suspect that Daryl may have started getting close to my wife during that week when she had to pick me up from work. Whenever I finished my shift, I'd often find my wife hanging out with Daryl and Brianna. They would be in the office, enjoying some rap music through Daryl's Beats by Dre headphones connected to his phone. Gabby mentioned that she enjoyed talking to Brianna and would spend time in the office with her and Daryl. Since I knew that Brianna and Daryl lived close to each other and were good friends, I didn't initially feel uneasy about his presence around them. Following that week, Gabby started coming to my workplace to socialize with Daryl and Brianna. Given that Brianna was supposed to be my wife's friend, I didn't mind her visiting or chatting on the phone. However, I somewhat overlooked Daryl being consistently present and engaging in conversations with Gabby. My wife received a lot of attention, particularly on Instagram, so I tried to keep any concerns in check, even when I saw her talking to Daryl without Brianna around. I didn't want to jump to conclusions and risk upsetting Gabby, leading to daily arguments in Spanish. It was last Wednesday when my concerns about my wife's potential infidelity began to surface. On that day, as I was leaving my workplace, I bid farewell to a colleague. He happened to be on the phone at the time and also said goodbye. What caught my attention was the way he mentioned my name, as if the person on the other end of the line knew me. So I inquired about who he was speaking to, and he responded with a smile, mentioning it was an old coworker of ours. He then asked me to wait for a moment, saying that this individual wanted to have a quick chat with me. He handed me the phone, and I was actually glad to reconnect with this guy. In my conversation with this former coworker, whom I'll refer to as Tyrell, we reminisced about our past work experiences and why he had left. He explained that his brother worked in a warehouse in Atlanta, and Tyrell had relocated there after his brother promised him a job, playfully mentioning that he now earned more than us. After our catch-up, Tyrell expressed that he wanted to talk to me about something important and requested my phone number. I agreed, and he instructed me to send him my number via Facebook direct message, DM. I complied and returned my friend's phone. Immediately after I sent him my number, Tyrell called me, even before I had reached my car. I answered the call and asked him what was going on. He inquired if I was in my car, and I confirmed that I was. He then urged me not to start driving because he had something significant to share. This raised my curiosity, so I pressed him for more details. He replied, emphasizing that I couldn't disclose what he was about to tell me to anyone, and I agreed to keep it confidential. He inquired about whether Gabby still visited my workplace, and this took me by surprise. I replied affirmatively, and he further inquired about whether Daryl was still conversing with Gabby. Again, I confirmed this, and his persistent questioning made me uneasy. He assured me he didn't want to stir up trouble, but believed Daryl had an interest in my wife. Since he no longer worked with us, he didn't care, and felt it was important for me to be aware of this. Hearing this sent a shiver down my spine. I questioned him about how he knew this, and he disclosed that he had witnessed their interactions. During his time working with us, Tyrell held a leadership position and moved between different departments. He mentioned that while walking around, he often observed Gabby and Daryl engaged in conversations. Additionally, he had informed our co-workers that he desired Gabby. He also made comments about her appearance. I probed further, asking Tyrell when he typically saw them together. He explained that it was usually about an hour before lunch. While he occasionally saw Gabby talking to Brianna, she conversed with Daryl more frequently. Tyrell indicated that it wasn't until she started visiting him on Saturdays, particularly when Daryl's department had to work overtime, that he suspected something might be happening. This revelation surprised me because I rarely worked overtime, making it unclear why she would be there. I inquired of Tyrell if he was certain about Gabby's Saturday visits, and he affirmed his certainty. He mentioned he was quite convinced that Daryl might be getting closer to her during one particular Saturday visit. Given the limited activities on Saturdays, they had a surplus of free time, and Daryl frequently played his Beats by Dre music speaker. Even with Gabby present, this seemed typical to Tyrell. However, after some time, he returned with news that he had heard loud Spanish music playing. Upon closer inspection, Tyrell described the situation as becoming intimate between Gabby and the guys. According to him, Daryl had a hold of Gabby by her neck while she engaged in twerking for him. Although my wife didn't possess an extremely curvaceous figure, she had enough to engage in twerking if she chose. I was left in shock when Tyrell shared this with me. I sought confirmation by asking if he was absolutely certain, and he responded firmly, emphasizing that he was not visually impaired. He recounted that everyone watched as she danced provocatively for Daryl, even mentioning that he lifted her shirt to reveal her backside through her leggings. I then asked whether she attempted to halt Daryl's advances, to which he replied in the negative. According to Tyrell, all she did was laugh and continue dancing for him, almost as if she were trying to win a competition. I struggled to believe the information Tyrell was sharing. He expressed his regrets and advised me to keep my wife away from him, including Brianna. I thanked him for sharing all of this with me and concluded our conversation shortly thereafter. I felt deeply embarrassed and humiliated by the situation. As I drove back home, my mind was filled with tumultuous thoughts. What bothered me even more was that Gabby's twerking incident with Daryl had occurred about 7 or 8 months ago. Who knows what may have transpired since then? They might have taken their rendezvous to his place, and she could have done more than just dance. I realized that I needed to confront Gabby and see if she would be forthcoming with the truth. Upon arriving home, I found my wife engrossed in a phone conversation with her mom. After some casual chatter, I asked her if she had met with Brianna today, to which she responded affirmatively. I then inquired about whether she had seen Daryl, and she replied in the negative. I expressed my surprise, mentioning that they seemed inseparable like the Three Musketeers. She claimed that Daryl wasn't around much, which I knew was a blatant falsehood. Following this exchange, my wife simply walked past me and into the kitchen to grab her phone, likely to text her friends. I couldn't believe that she had blatantly lied to me about her relationship with Daryl. Even I had observed how often he was around her, and I felt deeply hurt by what seemed increasingly evident. Subsequently, all I could do was watch her prepare dinner for our children while feeling a sense of sadness and despair. My emotions were a volatile mix of anger and teary-eyed sorrow. At this point, I desperately needed concrete evidence that something was indeed happening. However, obtaining such proof would be extremely challenging, given that it involved people I worked with. I couldn't risk losing my job, and Terrell's account of the twerking incident wouldn't suffice as grounds for divorce. Moreover, they could easily deny it ever occurred. My wife might argue that she was merely delivering lunch to Daryl, and the elderly security guard would likely corroborate her story. I had no choice but to assume that my wife had cheated on me. It was clear that she had secretly met up with Daryl and twerked for him 8 months ago. With so much time having passed, I couldn't fathom what might have transpired since then. I needed to figure out how to obtain substantial evidence that could be used in a divorce case, all while treading carefully to safeguard my job and anticipate potential backlash from her family. I will provide an update if I manage to devise a plan of action. Update. The situation keeps deteriorating, and I've been noticing more troubling signs. It's becoming increasingly likely that my coworker may have had an affair with my wife. To provide some context, my wife, whom I'll call Gabby, had to pick me up from work because my car needed new brakes. While waiting for me to finish work, Gabby struck up a friendship with a girl in the front office named Brianna and a coworker in the shipping department named Daryl. Whenever I left the floor, I would often see them chatting and listening to rap music. Over time, my wife became close friends with them, even visiting my workplace on her days off to join them during their lunch breaks. However, a few weeks ago, I received a distressing call from an old coworker named Tyrell. He informed me that Daryl may have made advances toward my wife. According to Tyrell, he witnessed them engaged in private conversations that appeared flirtatious. These interactions would typically occur an hour before Daryl's lunch break, which raised suspicion. What's even more troubling is that when Tyrell and Daryl worked overtime on Saturdays, Gabby would visit him. Initially, he hesitated to reveal anything, but one Saturday, he witnessed something that compelled him to share with me after Tyrell had departed. He'd described entering the shipping dock and hearing Spanish music playing. As he peered inside, he observed my wife dancing and twerking for Daryl. Their interactions began playfully, but gradually turned more sensual and aggressive. He recounted how Gabby allowed Daryl to grasp her by the neck and lift her shirt to reveal her backside. Although they had initially appeared to be engaging in playful banter, it became evident that their interactions had taken a more serious turn, particularly in the way they exchanged glances. My initial response was to make excuses for my wife, questioning whether he was certain it was her. He assured me of his certainty, pointing out that Gabby was of Cuban descent, had tattoos on her arms, and consistently wore her hair in a ponytail. Tyrell disclosed that after witnessing this, he decided to leave and head home. I struggled to come to terms with the shocking information he had shared. The revelation that my wife had been twerking for Daryl was distressing enough, but what made it even worse was that this incident had occurred approximately 8 or 9 months ago. Considering the passage of time, I couldn't help but wonder about the nature of her relationship with Daryl at present. While I appreciated Tyrell's honesty in sharing this information, I couldn't help but feel that it may have come too late. I wished he had spoken up at the time, but it appeared that his reluctance to snitch on Daryl had allowed the situation between Daryl and my wife to progress. Upon returning home, I initiated a conversation with Gabby regarding her friendship with Daryl. She claimed that she occasionally spoke to Daryl, but he wasn't usually around, and she primarily conversed with Brianna. I recognized this as a fabrication since I had witnessed their interactions on some occasions. Thanks to Tyrell's revelations, I began to see through the facade she was putting on. It became apparent that she was using her friendship with Brianna as a pretext to spend time with Daryl. Following my conversation with Tyrell and Gabby's dishonesty concerning her relationship with Daryl, I started to conduct some discreet investigations around the house. Unfortunately, I couldn't access her iPhone due to her secure passcode, and she seemed to be constantly engrossed in conversations with her mom and sister. Instead, I resorted to eavesdropping on her conversations, particularly those that occurred late at night. I noticed that she would often retreat to the back porch to engage in these conversations, prompting me to discreetly listen in. While I couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, some phrases caught my attention, such as, "Stop, you're crazy," or mentions of having fun at a specific club in our suburban area. On one occasion, I overheard her saying, "She can't go over there." I strongly suspected that "there" referred to Daryl's house, but without the full context, I couldn't be entirely certain. When she returned inside, I questioned her about her phone conversation, and she claimed it was her sister Brianna, or someone else. However, the giggling and secretive behavior left me unconvinced by her explanation. I must have been oblivious before Tyrell's call because afterward, I noticed several red flags. My wife now always has her phone with her, avoids talking to me, and claims to be busy. When I suggested being intimate, she found it funny and said it wouldn't be appropriate with our kids at home. When I questioned why that would stop us, Gabby dismissed me as crazy and told me to leave her alone. She also said she wasn't in the mood. These actions both before and after Tyrell's call have made me doubt my wife's fidelity, and I wonder how I ever considered this behavior normal. Last Saturday, I believe I caused her to miss an opportunity to be with Daryl, which angered her. After my work shift, Gabby called me while I was driving home. She mentioned her plans to go out again and told me to cook for the kids. I immediately assumed she wanted to meet Daryl, so I lied, saying I had errands to run before returning home. She claimed she was already getting ready to leave and asked her sister to watch the kids, even though I knew that wasn't possible. Despite Gabby trying to guilt me into making her stay home, I reminded her that I have the right to go out and do things, and I might not be back until later. Gabby responded with a dismissive, "Whatever," and hung up on me. Later that night, she had an attitude, and when I spoke a few words, she exploded with anger, blaming me for ruining her evening. I told her I didn't care, and that my errands were more important than her socializing. Gabby claimed I never mentioned running errands, and I countered by saying she never mentioned her plans to go out. After my shower, I noticed she was on the porch, talking on her phone and looking irritated. I'm pretty sure she was discussing me. However, a couple of days ago, things took a turn for the worse. That night, after I finished work, Gabby prepared dinner. She entered the bedroom while I was browsing new Jordans on my phone and informed me that dinner was ready. When I arrived in the dining room, she was dressed up, getting ready to go out. I inquired about her plans, and she mentioned she was heading out with some friends, leaving me in charge of the kids. I asked her with whom she was going out, and Gabby simply replied, "Her friends, again." I expressed my concern that she couldn't just leave like that, and she accused me of trying to control her. With an attitude, she walked out the door. I was quite upset because I knew what this was all about. She was still upset about the Saturday when she couldn't see Daryl, and she had been visibly sad about it ever since. My wife didn't return until around 2:30 in the morning. Throughout the night, I sent her texts, and her only response was, "Please stop texting me," which frustrated me. When she finally arrived, I was playing our son's PlayStation, and as soon as I saw her, we began arguing. I questioned why she came home so late, and she simply stated that she was hanging out with her friends, a response I wasn't willing to accept. I pointed out that I was supposed to be in bed, but I stayed up waiting for her to come home. She claimed that I never complained when she came home late in the past, to which I responded that I was always with her, so that argument didn't hold water. She cursed at me and accused me of trying to control her, but I disagreed. After a while, our son came out to see what all the yelling was about, and when he asked what was wrong, Gabby said she wouldn't argue with me anymore and stormed into the bedroom. My son saw the video game running and asked if he could play it. I agreed, but told him it would be just for a little while before he needed to go back to sleep. Once he agreed, he started playing the game while I wanted to continue arguing with Gabby. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me into thinking I was a controlling husband, especially when she was the one who came home late. I usually tried to stay calm, but my suspicions got the best of me. Coming in at 2 a.m. was disrespectful, especially considering how she had left. After our argument, we went into our bedroom to continue discussing when she had left. As I entered the bedroom, I was about to argue, but I stopped mid-sentence when I saw something surprising. When I walked in, my wife was undressing, and it looked like she was wearing a black string as underwear. I suppose she thought I would still be with our son because she seemed surprised when I walked in. She just stood there in a piece of string, and I saw her differently. After briefly looking at me, she gave me a look that suggested we would just end up arguing if I asked her anything. She grabbed her pajamas from the bed and decided to change in the bathroom. I couldn't believe what I had just seen, and I have to admit it left me stunned. I decided I would sleep on the couch because it would be awkward after that. My brain couldn't process what I had witnessed. I had never seen my wife wear such revealing underwear before. It was almost like she was wearing a black string. To be fair, Gabby did own some provocative underwear, but she hadn't worn them in a long time. She liked wearing skimpy swimwear for vacation photos on Instagram, but what she had on was more like something you'd see on a website like WorldStar. At this point, I was convinced that my wife was acting incredibly suspicious and keeping secrets. After coming across some advice online, I saw that many suggested recording her saying or doing something incriminating. So, I ordered a voice-activated recording device, VAR, and planned to place it in her car. I asked a friend if I could use his address for the delivery, and he agreed without asking any questions. I'll pick up the device when it arrives in the mail. The last thing I need is for her to see the package and start questioning me about it. I'm determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. Thanks to Tyrell, many of my suspicions seem to be on point. I'll try to provide updates, but I should be able to do so as long as I can keep my emotions in check and act as normal as possible. Update. I want to express my gratitude to everyone who has supported me during this challenging time with my wife. Your assistance in my quest to discover if my wife has been unfaithful has been invaluable. These conversations have been essential, providing both strength and wisdom in my pursuit of the truth. I truly appreciate all the support. However, the advice I've received here has been somewhat divided on how to handle this situation. Some have suggested using evidence and proof against her, while others advise confronting the red flags head-on. I was trying to decide the best course of action, but today, my wife made a decision that forced my hand. Yes, my wife broke her vows. During our vacations, she would wear revealing swimwear, but it was usually for Instagram photos to showcase herself. It's widely understood that this type of string underwear isn't something you wear casually. It's meant to be shown off to someone. Witnessing this left me stunned, and I simply walked out of the room without engaging in an argument. Thanks to Tyrell, my world is currently in turmoil, and the signs are unmistakable. Before Tyrell's input, I always tried not to be the jealous type. Gabby is undeniably beautiful and receives compliments regularly. She enjoys sharing pictures on Instagram and garners a lot of attention there. Many comments on her photos are inappropriate, and even older pictures still receive likes. It's challenging for a jealous person to be with a wife who has thousands of guys following her on social media. I was aware of this and tried to be understanding. However, this situation is different, and I may have been too passive because we're married. I believed that this situation needed to change, and it was time to gather evidence. After purchasing a voice-activated recording, VAR device, I planned to obtain proof, and if it turned out to be real, I intended to seek a divorce. With the VAR device in hand, I rode with her to the supermarket, hoping to improve our relationship. I thought that if there were issues between us, we could address them, and she would stop seeing Daryl. I told Gabby that it was fine for her to go out with friends. But as a parent, she still had responsibilities to her family. She responded by asserting her independence as a grown woman and accused me of being controlling. She insisted on her right to spend time with her friends and not be confined to the house or work all the time. I mentioned to her that I understood her desire for fun, but her spontaneity was becoming excessive. She wouldn't disclose when or where she was going. Gabby acknowledged this and said she'd be more considerate of me and our family. Following that conversation, she did show more consideration for my feelings, and it felt like we could have a deeper discussion about our relationship. However, that changed when Daryl called a couple of days ago. Initially, I wasn't sure how to handle this, but this afternoon, Gabby pushed me to take action. Earlier this week, she mentioned that all our kids wanted to watch a Pixar movie with their older cousins this Saturday. She said she would take them so they could all watch the movie together, which I thought was a great idea, as it meant quality time with the kids. When they left, a few hours later, I received a call from my nephew. He mentioned that he heard we had a particular video game he wanted to play and asked if he could come over after the movie. I told him that if Gabby was planning to bring him back home after the movie, he could come over and play the game. He was excited and said he would ask Gabby when she came to pick them up after the movie. His statement confused me. I thought Gabby was supposed to watch the movie with them, but he told me Gabby had informed them that she was just going to drop them off. I had slept in a bit that morning, so I wondered if I had misunderstood. However, I distinctly remembered Gabby saying she would watch the movie with the kids, and now I realized it was a lie. It was then that I recalled it was a Saturday, and Terrell had mentioned that Gabby would spend overtime with Daryl on Saturdays. Considering the time, the guys would still be working if it was indeed a Saturday. When I tried to call my wife, she didn't answer the phone, which infuriated me. Following that, I called my workplace and asked the security department if the guys were still working. They confirmed that they were, and I hung up, deeply suspicious of whether Gabby was actually with Daryl. I got in my car and decided to drive to my workplace, knowing I could likely arrive before they left. During the drive, all I could mutter was "stupid B" in frustration for what she was putting me through. I didn't know what to think, but I was filled with anger. We had discussed this issue before, and I thought she had understood. This time, I was determined not to let it slide, especially since she had lied to me. If Daryl was avoiding my wife, I no longer cared. I drove into the parking lot and began searching for her car. I quickly spotted it, and I was already feeling angry. I entered the building and headed down to the shipping dock where Daryl was working. As I walked through the double doors, Daryl's crew jumped up, surprised to see me. They were wearing their jackets, which suggested they were about to leave until they noticed me. Scanning the area, I couldn't spot Daryl or Gabby, so I figured they must be in the trucker's lounge room. As I was heading in that direction, one of the crew members tried to block me and told me I didn't belong in the building. I warned him to back off, making it clear I wasn't joking and would confront him if necessary. He tried to act tough, but he didn't budge, indicating he didn't want to fight. Without wasting any more time on him, I proceeded to the trucker's lounge where they had to be. The trucker's lounge used to be a small area where truckers would wait for their trucks to be loaded. A few years ago, they implemented a new rule that required all truck drivers to remain in their trucks and wait until they received their paperwork. This rule was meant to prevent theft, although I couldn't fathom why anyone would want to steal the cargo they were shipping. The room was small, with only 2 vending machines that were no longer operational. I was sure I would find them there, and hearing Daryl's groaning confirmed my suspicions. Staying close to the wall, I peered inside and couldn't believe what I witnessed. Daryl was involved with my wife, and it was shocking. Not only did I see Daryl sitting on a couch with his shirt unbuttoned and his pants and underwear down, but he also had my wife's face in his lap. It resembled a scene from a dark story, as if he were a lord in the mountains, forcing a village woman to engage in explicit activities. He looked down at my wife while she knelt obediently performing a certain act. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone, sensing that I might need it. I started recording, capturing at least 7 seconds of their actions. Gabby was clearly too preoccupied to notice, and Daryl was simply watching her. After obtaining some evidence, I confronted them loudly, shouting, "Damn you, witch!" Daryl appeared surprised to see me, while Gabby gave me a highly annoyed look on her face. She looked up at me and asked in an agitated manner what I was doing there. I just shouted at her, "Damn you, witch! Is this how you treat me?" She replied, "Can you please just go away?" Mind you, she was still holding him in her hand. I retorted with anger, saying to forget both of them while she covered her face, exclaiming, "Oh my God!" What surprised me was that she didn't appear embarrassed about being caught. She seemed more embarrassed by my behavior in front of Daryl. Following that, I unleashed a string of insults at her, but all she did was roll her eyes and implore me to leave them alone and just go away. It seemed like she just wanted me gone, and the fact that our marriage was over didn't matter to her. It felt as though she was saying, "Oh well," which infuriated me even more. After hurling countless insults at her, all she could muster were phrases like, "Please leave," and "I don't care." I yelled at her, questioning how she could do this to me after claiming she loved me. She shot back, "I don't love you like that, okay?" Hearing that nearly crushed me, and she repeated her demand for me to leave. I informed her that I wanted a divorce, and she responded in a frustrated tone with a simple, "Okay." After that, I exited the warehouse, got into my car, and drove home. Upon reaching home, I was consumed with anger. I punched the walls and yelled at the top of my lungs. I couldn't believe she would betray me like this. She had become a person I no longer recognized, and I was absolutely fed up with the nonsense she had put me through. As it stands, she still hasn't returned, and I have no idea where she is. I suspect she might be with her sister, having to explain the situation. Whatever comes next, I have irrefutable evidence of her infidelity. I intend to use it in various ways, especially during the divorce proceedings. It clearly demonstrates her irresponsibility and lack of concern for our marriage. It's unfortunate to admit, but I likely shouldn't have relied on Tyrell to inform me about this, as the signs were already present. She only valued the things I did for her, and that's the sole reason she married me. Gabby didn't seek love, she simply craved being wanted. Since Daryl was attractive to her and desired her, they became involved. Relationships like this one usually end in failure because women like her tend to revert to their true selves. I recently purchased a voice-activated recorder, VAR, which I've only used once. It appeared that all I required was someone who no longer worked with us. Update. People here seem to believe that I was hesitant to confront my wife, but that's not the case. After discovering my wife's infidelity, I took significant steps to consult with a lawyer and initiate divorce proceedings. Gabby was the type of person who felt entitled if she were to be married. I spared no expense to keep her content, and she led me to believe that's what a good husband should do. She acted as though I was fortunate because she was a trophy wife, especially considering the attention she received. I bought into it, particularly since she was a devoted mother and initially a good wife. She didn't love me. She only craved the attention and the comfortable life I had worked hard to provide. Another issue was that Gabby always sought attention. This was evident in her love for Snapchat and Instagram. She had a large number of followers, with 80% of them being men. Even worse were the comments on her posts. That's why I had to develop a thick skin when I was with her, especially when she posted bikini photos from our trips to places like Vegas and Jamaica. It was now clear that she wouldn't change. Despite finding someone willing to take care of her, it didn't matter when she encountered someone she found attractive. He treated her as she believed she should be treated. With everything coming to an end, I had to face the reality of the situation and decided to call my siblings to share everything with them. It was something I didn't want to do, but it was undoubtedly the right time. I called my older brother, who we'll call Ricky, and vented about what had happened, using a lot of strong language. After he asked if I was home, he mentioned he needed to run an errand but would swing by later. Next, I called my younger sister and shared the news with her too. She gave me a lecture but suspected Ricky would contact her about it. She said she'd check on me later and hung up. Later, she called back and told me Ricky was on his way to pick me up. She asked about the kids, and I said they were at the movies, with Gabby responsible for picking them up. She wasn't thrilled about watching the kids, but given my emotional state, there wasn't much we could do. After hanging up, I started to doze off until I heard Ricky's car pull up. I opened the door and saw my imposing-looking brother approaching with a bag and his toolbox. Ricky had a tough appearance, having played football in high school and college, and now with his shaved head and beard, he looked like a military veteran. He came over and gave me a heartfelt hug. Even though we typically played the tough guy role with our emotions, tears welled up because we both knew it was what I needed. After the hug, he mentioned that he had stopped at a store and bought new locks for the house. He thought it was crucial to secure the place so Gabby couldn't come in later and take everything. After an hour of talking and changing the locks, we went to Ricky's house. Ricky and his girlfriend were incredibly supportive and did their best to lift my spirits throughout the weekend. My sister, Gina, also came over to talk to me. After reaching out to the rest of my family, I couldn't help but replay the traumatic event in my mind. I hoped to catch my wife confessing or something similar, but the opportunity for confrontation arrived sooner than expected. When she admitted she didn't love me in that way, a burning desire for revenge consumed me. I wanted payback for how she had deceived me that day. The urge for vengeance was strong, and I wasn't finished dealing with this situation yet. On that Sunday, Gabby's sister actually gave me a call. Initially, my brother didn't want me to answer, but I had to remind him that my kids were over at Gabby's place. I stepped out of the room and answered the call. After picking up, her sister, who we'll call Christina, asked me what was happening. She mentioned that her sister wouldn't return to the house, but didn't want to explain why. I told her the truth, that I had caught her sister cheating on me at my workplace. There were a few seconds of silence after that. Then she started denying it and claimed I was lying about her sister. After letting her vent, I told her to hang up, saying I would show her the evidence. She started saying something, but I hung up angrily. After that, I sent her the video and didn't hear from her for the rest of that day. Following that, I spent the remainder of the day trying to relax. When Monday came, I went to work and spoke with my supervisor about Daryl and Gabby. Surprisingly, he provided me with a testimony sheet to file my complaint. While I was completing the paperwork, he expressed his sympathy and asked if I was certain this was happening. Angrily, I confirmed and asked him if he wanted to see the video I had taken. He was surprised and inquired if I actually had evidence. I confirmed that I did. He took back the form I was filling out and said it wouldn't be necessary anymore. He picked up the phone and discussed the situation with someone. After hanging up, he mentioned that he had contacted the manager and asked them to send the video to his email, as he would address it when the boss visited the facility in a couple of days. I agreed to this, but also informed him that I wouldn't be coming to work during those days, to which he was just about to suggest the same. A few days ago, Gabby's sister Christina called me back, which surprised me. She said she had talked to Gabby, and Christina wanted me to have a conversation with Gabby that night because the kids wanted to come home. I agreed to take my kids, but expressed my reluctance to talk to Gabby because, in my view, there was nothing left to discuss. She mentioned that she understood Gabby had made a mistake, but believed I should be the more reasonable one and consider the family. Somehow I felt like I was the one being unreasonable. I informed her that I wasn't willing to talk to her because she had cheated with my coworker and caused embarrassment at my workplace. I pointed out to Christina that she had brought another guy into my house and I was expected to act like none of that had occurred. She replied by saying that wasn't true, claiming that Gabby only had involvement with him at work or at his place. I laughed it off and remarked, How can I be sure of that? I mentioned that, for all I knew, she might have been involved with Daryl's friends when she was around. Chris got upset and stated that wasn't how it happened. I asked her to clarify what did happen, and that's when she revealed everything Gabby had told her. I regretted bringing it up, especially because I knew Gabby wouldn't lie to Christina, which made it even worse. According to Christina, when Gabby first met Brianna, Daryl was already talking to Brianna, and Gabby informed them that she was there to pick me up. While waiting for me, they started talking and began hanging out whenever she came around. Chris said they became friends over time and enjoyed spending time together during lunch. She mentioned that Daryl began complimenting her, particularly on her appearance, which surprised her but made her feel good about the attention. One day she slipped up and told Brianna that she found Daryl attractive, and Brianna informed him about it. Chris explained that after that, he started getting too close to her and making inappropriate comments. When she heard this, she played it off, but deep down she liked him and often thought about it. I expressed my disbelief and asked her why she didn't tell me earlier, as I would have put a stop to it. She replied that she didn't want to because she really liked him and found his unpredictable behavior appealing. I inquired about when all of this started, and Christina hesitated to tell me at first. However, when I threatened to end the call, she had to reveal the details. She mentioned that she wasn't sure when it started, but Gabby had told her about a birthday party hosted by Brianna's sister. I was aware of Brianna's sister's tendency to get drunk at parties. Brianna had invited Gabby to the party, and she had attended. According to Christina, Daryl had also been present at the party. She mentioned that Gabby was taken by surprise when she saw him at the party, and they spent time together having a good time. Christina asked if he was trying to pursue her, and Gabby confirmed that he was. She explained that they started dancing together, but things took a more aggressive turn over time. I inquired about what she meant by aggressive, and she said he asked her to twerk for him. Gabby turned around and began twerking on him. She mentioned that with the tight leggings she was wearing, it was evident that he was enjoying her twerking and grinding against him. After a while, he began kissing her, and they progressed to making out. Christina explained that they started going out together, and things began to escalate beyond what was acceptable. This raised more red flags for me. She went on to say that when Gabby went to hang out at Daryl's apartment with Brianna, he made advances on her, and she allowed it. Seeing this, Brianna left them alone in his apartment. Chris added that after making out, he performed BJ on her. Eventually, he repeatedly attempted to engage in BJ, and sometimes she allowed it, while other times she stopped him. It reached a point where she no longer resisted, and he convinced her to reciprocate. I asked Christina if these encounters happened when my kids were around, and she clarified that everything occurred at work and at his apartment. I expressed disbelief and told Christina that I couldn't believe she had done this to me. She replied that she couldn't believe it either, and mentioned that Gabby thought he was skilled and appreciated his wild nature. Christina explained that Gabby initially thought that going down on her would be the extent of it, but he desired more. She recalled a day when he turned her around and pinned her against the couch. She admitted that in hindsight, it was clear that the day had come when he had his way with her. Christina told her that she should have gotten up and left, but she couldn't bring herself to do it, allowing him to take her from behind. I shook my head in disbelief and had to ask once more how in the world she could do this to me. She explained that Gabby had found it all very exciting, and the fact that it was wrong added to the thrill. Christina mentioned that she had always been attracted to his rebellious nature, and when he finally won her over, he didn't disappoint. She noted that he was so eager that she was worried the neighbors might hear them. I could relate to what she was saying because when I was younger, my brother and I had to help my aunt move out of one of her apartments. While we were moving things, we suddenly heard loud noises. Later on, we realized that someone in the apartment below us was watching an action movie or something, and it sounded like Vin Diesel or James Bond was living right beneath us. The walls were incredibly thin, to say the least. If Daryl's apartment was as budget-friendly and poorly constructed as my aunt's, then it's highly likely that the neighbors could hear Daryl and Gabby, especially if they were being intimate from behind. She explained that after that initial encounter, whenever he wanted it, he got it. It was meant to be their little secret until Tyrell spilled the beans, showing that he had more courage than they had assumed. Christina started to say more, but I told her that the details about the party and the apartment situation were already overwhelming. She asked if I could at least be the calm and rational one again and have a conversation with Gabby, but I firmly declined. I explained that I would be coming over tomorrow to pick up the kids, but I had no intentions of having a conversation with Gabby. She suggested that it wouldn't work if both of us were stubborn, but I reiterated that she had made a fool out of me, and I had no intention of giving her another chance. I informed her of my plans to pick up the kids, and she expressed frustration, letting out a groan before hanging up. On that day, I felt really down, and I had to work my way back up from that low point. A few hours later, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. They followed up with a text, and I realized it was a coworker I knew, which surprised me. I was driving at the time, so I connected the call through my Bluetooth dashboard. He inquired about what was going on, and I simply mentioned that I was running errands. He then asked me if I had anything to do with Daryl getting fired, which caught me off guard. According to him, there were 2 men and a woman in suits who came to our workplace with our supervisor. They went straight to the area where the truckers' lounge was located. Hearing this, I suspected that they were checking the lounge to see if it matched the room in the video. Later, he mentioned that about 20 minutes after their arrival, they called Daryl to the office and asked him to gather his belongings. I confessed the truth to my coworker, and he said he would have done the same thing. He also asked when I would be returning to work, and I informed him that I planned to come in on Friday and work a half day. He responded positively and said he'd catch up with me later. I felt relieved and made dinner for myself that night. Now my main focus was on the divorce proceedings. The following day was the day I had to pick up my kids, and I wasn't particularly looking forward to it. It had been several days since I had seen Gabby, and my brother Ricky joined me just in case. When I arrived, my kids were genuinely excited to see me. They told me that their mother had been unkind to them and had been ignoring them, so they wanted to come home. Glancing over, I saw Gabby in the kitchen on her cell phone, ignoring me and chatting with her sister. I told the kids to go ahead and get in my car, and my oldest daughter asked if she could bring her iPad with her. I agreed, but Gabby suddenly objected, saying that she had to leave it with her because she had bought it. My daughter was becoming emotionally upset, so I instructed her to wait in the car. When she walked away, I expressed my disbelief that she would act so petty. This led to a heated argument, and I didn't hold back this time. I called her derogatory names, and she retorted by labeling me a snitch for getting Daryl fired from her job. I pointed out that she had previously claimed not to know Daryl that well, and she responded with profanity, telling me to go cry to my mama. She also remarked that I was fortunate she even paid attention to me. She suggested that Daryl and I could have settled things with a fight instead of getting him fired. I retorted that I only fight for real women, not thots who don't deserve that privilege. She insulted me, calling me dusty and lame, and declared that she doesn't love a lame guy. Frustrated, I grabbed a glass of orange juice and threw it at her, narrowly missing her. In shock, she retaliated by throwing a fork at my head, which thankfully missed as well. All of this chaos was eventually stopped by my brother Christina and Christina's friend who were present. Gabby continued yelling that she didn't want me and kept saying, "Next, next!" My brother practically dragged me to the porch to calm down. And once I had cooled off, I left because I had expended all my energy and couldn't fight my brother to get back inside. When I returned to the car, I informed my daughter that her mother had taken the iPad. She responded by saying she didn't care anymore. She just wanted to leave. I couldn't believe the ordeal I had just gone through, and while I acknowledged that I had crossed a line, it still felt good to let out my frustrations on her. Right now, my kids are with me, and with the new locks on the door, they will remain with me. I had to gently break the news to the kids that their mother and I wouldn't be living together anymore, which crushed them, though they understood. As I mentioned before, my main focus now was on the divorce papers, and the lawyers I spoke to said the video could be helpful in various arguments. I firmly believe my wife is overly self-assured, and I hope her actions were worth it. If she thinks she can have a meaningful relationship with Daryl, she's deluding herself. Daryl, or anyone else for that matter, is unlikely to commit to her. She's approaching 40 and has many kids, and he's not looking to become a stepdad overnight. If that's her expectation, I know Daryl better than she does. Gabby was merely a conquest for him, and once he's done, he'll move on to someone else. I'm certain that reality will sink in soon, and it probably won't take even a year. At least now I can have some peace of mind. But I still worry about my kids and my immediate family, perhaps even Christina if she ever realizes how foolish Gabby's actions were.
I discovered through DNA tests that my kids aren't mine, unveiling a tale of cheating and revenge. After the jury heard the closing arguments, they were excused since it was 4 p.m. The judge sent them back to their hotel, where they were sequestered for the 2-week trial that followed a nearly year-long investigation. The defendant returned to the Tarrant County Correctional Center in Fort Worth. Nothing more would happen until Monday, when the jury reconvened. I decided to walk back to my room at the Hilton Garden Inn in downtown Dallas, stopping at a bar for a beer and a bite. I had just finished my burger and was halfway through my beer when I heard a woman behind me. "Hey cowboy, buy a girl a drink," she asked. I turned around and recognized her. "Ashley." "Ashley Marks, is that really you?" I asked. "Yes, it's me," she said with a smile. I invited her to sit and called the waitress. "How long has it been? 16, 17 years?" I asked. 17 years, she replied. Ashley was one of my best friends in high school, along with Steve Jenkins and Jolene Carter. We were known as the Four Musketeers until her dad got a job in Austin during our senior year. I hadn't seen or heard from her since. "I've been good," she said. "Went to the University of Texas, graduated, got married, got divorced, and now work as a reporter for the Austin Statesman." "Wow, what happened?" I asked. She shrugged. "I was married, but he wasn't. After catching him cheating 3 times, I kicked him out. I think he ended up running a McDonald's in Beaumont." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said. "So, what brings you to Dallas?" "I've been covering the Jenkins trial. I saw you testify. I feel sorry for Jolene. She didn't deserve to die like that." I stayed silent, thinking how Jolene didn't deserve to die, though I would have preferred a harsher fate for her. That possibility was taken away by the man I once considered my best friend. "So, how are you, Bill Jennings?" she asked. "Considering the last 16 years of my life have been a sham, I'm okay," I said. "At least you have kids," she said. "Yeah, they're mine legally," I replied. "You may not be their biological father, but you're their dad in every way that matters," she said. "You're probably right, but it doesn't make me feel better." "Look, I have a confession," she began. I wondered what she was about to say. "Every reporter wants your story. I want to tell it if you'll let me. I understand if you have trust issues, but no one knows you like I do. We can sign a contract. You give me exclusive rights, and I protect you. My editor approved it. I won't publish anything without your approval." I realized she was right. Reporters from all major outlets were contacting me. It was overwhelming. Something told me I could trust her. "Okay, Ashley, you have a deal. How do we do this?" "Here, my hotel, or yours." "What do you mean?" she asked. "I've wanted to visit the old homestead. It's only a couple of hours away by car. We have the weekend off since the jury doesn't start deliberating until Monday. Let's drive back and you can show me where it all happened. You can tell me the details on the way, and I'll talk to your kids and parents if that's okay." I thought it would be a nice break from the trial and a chance to show Ashley the neighborhood and maybe repair our relationship. "Sounds good," I said. "Where are you staying?" "At the Hilton around the corner. You? Same place. Want to grab a few things before we go?" She nodded, and we agreed to meet at my truck in the parking lot. "You can't miss it," I told her. "It's a big blue cab. Still the same bill with the biggest truck. Give me about half an hour to change and grab some things." We hit the road, and by the time we got onto Highway 20 towards Abilene, the sun had set. I was relieved, since I disliked driving in the sun. Ashley had changed into a professional outfit, a denim skirt and a white blouse, looking as beautiful as she did in high school. I couldn't help but notice her legs. She smiled. "I know what you're thinking, cowboy." "Really?" I asked. "You're wondering why you didn't sleep with me instead of Jolene," she said. I laughed. "Is that your reporter's instinct?" "No, it's the way you look at my legs, just like in high school," she said. "Legs like that are hard to forget," I told her. She smiled and took out a tape recorder. "So, is there a Mr. Right in Austin?" I asked. "No, since my divorce I focused on work. I've had trust issues with men and haven't met anyone I want to spend time with," she replied. "Sorry to hear that," I said. She laughed. "Somehow I doubt it. Damn those reporter instincts." "Shall we start this interview?" I said. "Sure," she said, placing the recorder on the dashboard. "You don't mind if I write this down, do you?" she asked. "Not at all," I said. "I want you to get it right." I took a sip of coffee and began. "As you know, Steve, Jolene and I were close in high school. After you left, it was mostly just the 3 of us. I proposed to Jolene after graduation, and she said yes. Steve and I joined the Marines and went to boot camp together. After training, we split up. He went into infantry, and I went into computer electronics. He ended up at Camp Pendleton, and I went to Quantico. A month later, Steve injured his knee and got a medical leave. You'll notice he still has a limp." "Couldn't he have gotten a desk job?" Ashley asked. "No, everyone in the Corps has to be combat ready. Steve's father pulled strings to get him into the county," I explained. "His father was a county commissioner, right?" Ashley asked. I nodded. "Yes, that's how Steve got elected. I graduated, came home, and got married. Steve was my best man. Later I found out he was also Jolene's best man, if you know what I mean." "That cow," Ashley said. 9 months after we married, Brian was born. A year later, I was sent to Okinawa for a year. Jolene and Brian stayed in my inherited house. After that tour, we moved to Camp Lejeune, where Jessica was born. Jolene had a tough pregnancy and insisted I get a vasectomy. She said it could be reversed if we wanted more kids. "Looking back, it's clear Steve's traits are in the kids," I said. Didn't you notice when they were born? She asked. It's a fair question, I said. Steve and I look similar, same hair, eyes, even earlobes. The kids looked like me when they were little and had their mother's eyes and nose. It wasn't until they were older that I noticed the resemblance to Steve. You'll see the baby pictures when we get to my house. I finished my service and we all came home. I worked at my dad's computer store and traveled a lot for business. Did it bother Jolene? Ashley asked. No, she liked it. I gave her time to bring Steve into our home and bedroom, which I found out much later, I said. You mean she actually slept with Steve in your bed? Asked Ashley. Yeah, all the time, I replied. That's why I burned the bed and mattress after she was shot. I don't blame you, Ashley said. I also burned the couch and chair Steve used. Jolene's wedding dress went up in flames too, I added. So Steve was a regular guest at your house? Ashley asked. Yes, he even had his own chair. I didn't mind at the time since I thought he was a friend. He'd come over after church on Sundays, we'd watch the game, and he'd fall asleep in that chair. The kids called him Uncle Steve, mostly because Jolene insisted. It annoyed me, but now I know why, I said. Want to warm up my coffee? I asked. Ready for a pit stop? Ashley turned off the recorder. Sure, I could use a smoke break. I nodded and took the next exit. After our break, we were back on the highway. Ashley set her recorder on the dashboard. So you had no idea Jolene was cheating with Steve? She asked. No, I was clueless. She never disrespected me, at least not to my face. There was never a hint of it when I was home. They were careful, I said. How did you find out? She asked. About a year ago, I was in Los Angeles for a month-long training. Jolene and the kids emailed and called me daily. One weekend, Brian sent a picture from a fishing trip with Jolene and Steve. Look at this, I said, showing Ashley the photo on my phone. It showed Brian with a large fish, Steve next to him, and Jolene on the other side with her hand on Steve's shoulder. What do you see? I asked. They look so much alike, even the dimples, she said. Exactly, and look at Jolene's hand. What stands out? I asked. Ashley enlarged the image. No rings, she said. Right, guess where they were? I led her to another photo album. Check this out, I said. Her eyes widened. Is that what I think it is? She asked. Yes, my wedding ring and my great-grandmother's ring. And guess whose cigarette butts are in that ashtray, I said. Steve's, she guessed. Yep, and the ashtray was on my nightstand, meaning Steve was in our bed, I said. Ashley started to cry. How could she do that? To you? And Jessica sent this. Yeah, she helped my mom clean the house and saw the rings. She took a picture and sent it to me. She was very upset, I said. I can imagine, Ashley said. Did she tell Jolene? No, I asked her not to say anything. I also asked her to take the rings and mail them to me, I said. Ashley laughed. I bet Jolene was frantic. Yeah. Jessica did everything I asked. Jolene was going crazy looking for the rings. She even had Steve help search. They went through the garbage, sinks, everything, I said. So what did you do? Ashley asked. My course ended on Friday, and I came home on Saturday night. Jolene met me, crying about losing her grandmother's ring. I asked all the usual questions and then pulled the rings from my pocket. She was stunned. How did you get them? She asked. I told her a trusted friend found them and mailed them to me. I didn't mention Jessica to protect her. I just said, don't put them in the ashtray next time Steve comes over. Her eyes went wide and she started crying, telling me she loved me. I'm sorry, I said, seeing Ashley's reaction. I didn't mean to swear. That's all right, she said. I've heard and said much worse. So what did you do then? I knew it was over between us then. I didn't have solid evidence of the cheating, just suspicions. I decided to investigate first. I wanted DNA tests to see if the kids were mine. I bought surveillance equipment, motion-activated cameras, audio recorders, and bugged our cell phones. Everything recorded on my home server and backed up to the cloud. I installed it all when she went shopping. The DNA test was easy. One of our clients in Dallas is a lab that does this testing. I took samples from the kids and myself, asking them not to tell their mother. When Steve came over that Sunday, he fell asleep in his usual chair, making it easy to swab his cheek. A week later, the lab mailed the results to the store. 99.9% probability Steve was the father of both kids, meaning this had been going on for at least 16 years. And you had no idea? Asked Ashley. No clue. She never gave me a reason to doubt her. Our bed life was normal, but a week after installing the equipment, I got the first video evidence. I was in Oklahoma City for a couple of days, and the kids were at my parents'. Jolene was alone and called Steve over that night. I logged into my server and saw them in our bed. Worse than seeing them together was hearing what they said, I said. What did they say? Asked Ashley. Hold on, I said. I need to focus on this road. It's dark, no lights, no guardrails, and near where Steve's pill-dealing buddies operated. Most are arrested now, but I stay cautious. I turned on the high beam, the light bar on the cab, the police scanner, and CB radio. I also pulled my weapon from the glove compartment. Finally, we reached my house and Ashley noticed a DSS car in the driveway. "Who is that?" she asked. "Defense," I said. "They've been watching the place since Steve's arrest. Some of his buddies tried to burn it down, but we stopped them. I have round-the-clock security now. DSS also watches my family and kids. Most of Steve's buddies are locked up, but we're not taking chances. Let's check it out and I'll introduce you." We parked in the garage and approached the patrol car. The officer got out. "Bill Jennings, I thought you were in Dallas for the trial." We shook hands. The trial went to the jury this afternoon. "This is Ashley Marks, a reporter from the Austin Statesman. She'll be with me this weekend," I said, nodding to her. He touched his hat. "Nice to meet you, ma'am. Things have been quiet since the Rangers took the last gang out. My replacement will arrive soon." "Thank you," I said. We shook hands. "Have a good night," he said as we headed for the door. "I will. You too," I replied. I set the coffee pot down and gave Ashley a tour of the house. The original house was built in 1866 by William Bryan Jennings after returning from the Civil War. It has been expanded, remodeled, and modernized many times, but still has traces of the original structure. Now it has 5 bedrooms, a 3-car garage, and a covered porch. There are bedrooms for the 2 kids, a master bedroom, a room converted for Jolene's sewing, and a playroom TV room for the kids. I suggested did Ashley take the master bedroom since it had a bathroom, and I'd sleep on the futon in my den. Ashley refused. "Nonsense," she said. "The bed is big enough for both of us and we're adults." That threw me off balance, but I agreed. She smiled and led me downstairs. "You have a story to tell, so let's get to it," she said. "Let me call the kids first," I said. I called my parents' house, talked to my dad, and then the kids. They were excited to see Ashley, and we planned to meet for lunch the next day. I grabbed my coffee and went to the living room, bringing a stack of DVDs from my study. "These should help," I said. Her eyes widened. "How many videos do you have?" "Quite a few," I said. "Some from home, some from my office. I've also scanned documents and have photos and audio recordings. Everything is here, with backups." I pulled out a DVD and put it in the player. "It's graphic," I warned. "I'm ready," she said. I reminded her that this DVD confirmed my suspicions and to listen carefully. The clip started with Jolene entering the bedroom, followed by Steve. Jolene took off her rings and tossed them into the ashtray on my nightstand. Steve, smiling, put out his cigarette on them. "To hell with him and his great-grandmother's ring," Jolene said. Steve laughed. Ashley grimaced, tears in her eyes. They started having lovemaking, and I fast-forwarded through the most graphic parts. "It takes about an hour," I said. "The pillow talk afterward is a real doomsdayer." "Thank you for showing me this," Ashley said. "It's one thing to hear about cheating, but another to see it." They lay on their backs smoking. Jolene turned to Steve. "I'm pregnant again, baby. Looks like you're going to be a daddy," she said. Steve frowned. "Damn it, didn't you take your pills?" he asked. "Yeah, but I might have missed a day or two." "Why can't you use a contraceptive?" "I hate them," he said. "You know the rules. No rubbers." "I can't have another feticide, Steve," she said. "I've had 3, and the last one almost eliminated me. Besides, Bill had a vasectomy after Jessica was born. It was your idea." "What do you want to do?" Steve asked. "I want to marry you and go away. Bill's figured us out anyway," she said. "I'm not the marrying kind. Bill works and pays, and I get paid," he said. "Don't worry about him. He's so stupid we could do it in front of him and he wouldn't notice." "Why don't you do to him what you do to other guys?" she said. "Those guys were illegals. No one misses them. Eliminating a respected member of society is different." "Maybe you can arrange an accident," Julie suggested. "People die driving down Indian Trail all the time. We might do something, but not yet. Maybe we can find something to incapacitate him gradually, like poison. Let's plan this carefully. Maybe after the kids are out of the house, you can get his insurance and part of his business. For now, go to the new clinic in Abilene. They'll take better care of you. I'll keep an eye on Bill. If he does something stupid like go to a lawyer, I'll handle it." "Okay," Jolene nodded. "Okay, baby, I'll do it. You're the man," she said, kissing him. "Now let's get on with it," she said, and they started again. I stopped the video. Ashley shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "I hate her, and you lived with her for 17 years? Or please tell me you went to a lawyer after that?" "I did. Let me tell you about it," I began. I had made an appointment with Alan Jackson, our family lawyer. I showed him the DNA report and the video of Jolene and Steve. Alan explained that although Texas is a community property state, infidelity can affect the division of property and alimony. However, he warned me about Steve. "Bill, Steve runs this county. He owns the sheriff's department and every judge. You have to file in the county where you've lived for 90 days. I don't think any judge here will hear your case. Plus, Jolene's pregnancy could delay the process. Texas courts won't finalize a divorce until the baby is born, regardless of who the father is. Steve also told me to inform him of any divorce attempts. Are you saying Steve ordered you to break attorney-client privilege? I asked. Alan nodded. I'm afraid so, Bill. I don't want to end up in a shallow grave on Indian Trail. I'm sorry, but I have no choice. I guess I don't have a choice either. You're fired. I need all our files now, I said. I anticipated that. The files are ready, he said, pointing to 2 boxes by the door. He handed me a note. Thanks, he said, realizing I gave him an out. I'm sorry, Bill. Can't you stay with Jolene for the kids? Could you be betrayed for 17 years? I asked. I don't think so, he admitted. Let me help you with the files. We walked to my truck. Call the people on that list. The authorities are very interested in Steve's actions. Steve is keeping tabs on you again. I'm sorry. Maybe we can work things out after this is over. I shook his hand. Thank you, Alan. We'll be in touch. I returned to my office, thinking over Alan's words. I wasn't worried about firing him because my father would support my decision. I was more concerned about Steve. I called the numbers Alan gave me and made appointments with a high-ranking family law attorney, a state's attorney, and a senior Texas Ranger officer, all in Dallas. I told my dad I fired Alan, and he was fine with it. Why did you do that? My father asked. I explained what Alan had told me and showed him the DNA and video evidence. His tone changed. Oh, crap, he said. I suspected Steve was trouble, but not this bad. Get the kids out of the house, there's no telling what they'll do. I agreed, but wondered what excuse to use. My father had a plan. When are your appointments in Dallas? He asked. Tomorrow, I replied. Tell Jolene you're going to Phoenix for a survey and might be gone for a few days. I'll come home with you and have the kids packed to stay with us. Hopefully that will keep them safe, he said. Are you going to tell the kids? I have to, Dad. They deserve to know the truth. I won't badmouth their mom, but they need to know. Okay, son, your mom and I will support you, he said. I called Brian and explained that he and Jessica would be staying with their grandparents starting today. What's going on, Dad? He asked. I'll tell you later. Just make sure you and your sister are home right after school. Or Grandpa will pick you up. Okay, Dad, love you. Love you too, son. A few minutes later, my secretary called, Bill, Steve Jenkins is here to see you. I pulled my weapon out, placed it on the desk, turned on the VCR to record the meeting, and told my father Steve was here. Steve walked in like he owned the place and immediately saw the pistol. Not a bad piece. Didn't know computer geeks use weapons, he said. What do you want, Steve? I asked, straight to the point. I know you saw Alan Jackson today. So what? I asked. If you're thinking of divorcing Jolene, forget it. I won't let you drag me through court. Why, Steve? I thought we were friends. How long has this been going on? Since prom night. Jolene and I started then and kept it up whenever you were away. Even on your wedding day, I was with her, he said. You were my best man, I said. And hers. 9 months later, Brian was born. When you went to Okinawa, we were together almost every night. Jolene had a feticide. 6 months later, it was my idea for her to make you get a vasectomy. We didn't want her to have your kids. We've been doing this for years, using your insurance for feticides. You couldn't just leave it alone? Now that, I'll come by anytime I want. You'll do as I say, or I'll make sure something happens to the kids, you fool, I said. If you touch my kids, I'll put you down like a dog. Remember who's in charge? I own this county, the sheriff's department, and the judges. I own you. Play along, and you'll be all right. Step out of line, and it's over for you and the kids. Would you hurt your own children? I've grown up. You better grow up too. See you around, Steve said and left. I stopped the tape, burned it to a DVD, sent copies to my dad and my contacts in Dallas, and called my father. Dad, check your mail. We need to move now. Steve just threatened me and the kids. Okay, my father said. I'll make the call. Call Brian to pick up Jess and come to my house. Let the school know. I'll meet you at the house. It's time to evict your wife. I agreed and called the school, explaining that neither my wife nor Steve Jenkins should pick up the children or even be in the building, as it was a matter of life and death. I also informed them that the children needed to leave immediately. I called Brian and told him to pick up Jess and go directly to his grandfather's house, no questions asked. I'll explain everything later. Do not contact your mother or Steve. It's crucial, do you understand? Yeah, Dad, I got it. What's going on? He asked. No time to explain now, just do as I say. Okay, Dad, he said. I grabbed my weapon and the DVD, left the office, and got in my truck. I knew my dad would be on his way, so I didn't wait. 15 minutes later, I arrived at home. Jolene's car was there, but Steve's truck wasn't. I entered the house, hand on my holstered pistol. Jolene was coming down the stairs. Bill, you're home early, she said. Did something happen? Is Steve here? I asked. Why would Steve be here? She replied. You know why, maybe for an afternoon hookup or to plan my homicide, I said. Jolene's eyes widened. Oh my God, I'm so sorry, watch this, I said. I put the DVD in the player and pressed play. Jolene watched Steve's confession and threat. "Bill, it's not what you think. We can work things out," she said. "Are you kidding me? You conspired with Steve to betray me, deny me children, and eliminate me. Now, get your things and leave my house." I took her left hand, removed my grandmother's ring, and gave her my ring. "Eat it, cow," I growled. "Bill, please don't do this. I'm so sorry," she cried. "You're a sorry excuse for a wife. Now get out." I threw her purse at her, and she rushed to the door. I followed her outside to her car. "Where will I go?" she asked, crying. "Stop crying. Go to Steve. Your mothers are hell. I don't care." Just then, 2 cars pulled into the driveway, my dad's truck and Steve's. Jolene stopped crying and smirked. "Now, we'll see who has to go," she said. "It would be easier if you cooperated. Are you really going to do this?" I asked. "In a heartbeat," she said. Dad blocked Steve's access with his truck and got out with his rifle. "What are you doing, Jennings?" Steve yelled. "I'm enforcing a restraining order," Dad said. "What kind of restraining order?" Steve asked. "The one against you and Jolene. Stay 500 feet away from my family and our property," Dad said. "Get out of here." Steve stopped moving. 2 cars with flashing lights pulled up, and 4 state troopers got out with their pistols ready. "We'll take it from here, Mr. Jennings," one officer said. Dad lowered his weapon. The officer handed Steve a restraining order. "Is that her?" he asked, nodding at Jolene. Dad shook his head. The officer handed Jolene the paper. "Mrs. Jennings, you must stay 500 feet away from the Jennings family and their property. If you refuse, you'll be taken into custody. Do you understand?" "Yes," Jolene said quietly. "Excuse me, officer," I said. "I'd appreciate it if you took Jolene and Mr. Jenkins into custody." "And why would I do that?" he asked. I hit play so they could hear the threat Jolene made against me and the kids. The officer gave her a hard look and pulled out handcuffs. "Mrs. Jennings, you're under arrest. Turn around and put your hands behind your back," he said. After handcuffing Jolene and reading her rights, he radioed another officer to arrest Steve. "You'll pay for this, idiot," Jolene said as she was led away. "You're all going to pay." A van from a local TV station pulled into the driveway. A reporter and camera crew walked up as Steve was being arrested. The reporter caught Steve's arrest on camera. "Do you know who I am?" Steve yelled. "Yeah, I know, and I don't care. You're under arrest," the officer replied. "I'll get your badge for this," Steve shouted, red-faced. I realized I should have mentioned their plot to eliminate me, but I didn't have the evidence with me. The news van moved so the patrol cars could leave. The reporter approached me, followed by my father. "Mr. Jennings, why was Commissioner Jenkins arrested?" she asked. "Making death threats is a crime, even for popular politicians like Steve and his married girlfriend. Now, I have to take care of my kids." My father joined me as we walked away, leaving the reporter in shock. Steve's reputation took a major hit. My next stop was my parents' house, where I explained everything to my family. I hated telling my children that Uncle Steve was their biological father, but they needed to know the truth. At first, they didn't want to believe it, but the DNA test results proved it. "I don't care what that paper says," Jessica said. "You're my father, and you always will be." "I agree," Brian said. I was proud of them. We hugged and shed a few tears. After saying goodbye, I went back to my house, packed for a few days, and headed to Dallas. "And that's when you found out how bad it really was?" Ashley interrupted. "Yeah," I said, resuming my story after a sip of coffee. The next day, I met with Dave Brooks, a Dallas attorney known for his courtroom prowess. He had arranged a meeting with all 3 men I had contacted. I was surprised to see them all there when I arrived. "Sorry to spring this on you, Mr. Jennings," Dave said, "but after that last video, we thought it best to meet together." I accepted his apology, and he introduced me to the others. John Hancock, a prosecutor from the state's attorney's office, took charge. "Mr. Jennings, I'm sorry for what you've been through. We have a lot of evidence against Steve Jenkins, including pills, weapon running, human trafficking, and 6 homicides. Your wife is involved too, especially in prostitution. The threats against you forced us to act quickly," he said. Don Jacobs, a Texas Rangers captain, explained the sheriff's department was compromised and replaced temporarily by Rangers and DSS officers. He stressed the urgency of the situation. "As for your divorce," Dave said, "I'll push for an annulment due to your wife's criminal activity and deception. If not, we'll file for infidelity and mental cruelty based on your evidence. I believe you'll get all your assets and custody of your children if you want." We discussed strategy for another hour. Dave handed me a DVD containing footage of my wife's actions. Some of it involves several men, including sheriff's deputies. John concluded with their plans for Steve and Jolene. "I'm not going to sugarcoat it, Mr. Jennings," he said. "We're going for the judicial execution for Jenkins. Your wife might get life without parole, but your lives are in danger. Be very careful. You and your children are lucky to be alive. Call us immediately if you see or suspect anything." "I hear you," I said. We shook hands and parted ways. My mind was spinning. The man I thought was my best friend was involved in pills, weapons, and homicide, and my wife was part of it. How did I miss this for 17 years? I got a frantic call from Brian. "Dad, come home now," he said. "What's going on?" I asked. "Just come home now," he said and hung up. I sped home. When I arrived, there were ambulances and police cars in front of the house. I rushed to the door as paramedics wheeled out a gurney. The paramedic pulled back the sheet, revealing Jolene's face. "I'm sorry, Mr. Jennings," the paramedic said. "She's gone." I wasn't that upset. Inside, I saw Steve on another gurney, his left shoulder shattered but alive. My kids and father were standing off to the side, unharmed. I hugged them. "What happened?" I asked. Dad explained. "We came to pick up a few things. Steve and Jolene showed up. Jessica and Jolene fought, and Steve pulled a weapon. I grabbed my rifle and walked in just as Steve pulled out his weapon. Jolene tried to stop him, but he shot her accidentally. I shot Steve in the shoulder and called emergency. Brian called me right after. Yes, Jolene was gone before the ambulance arrived. "It's okay, Dad, you did the right thing," I said. I remembered the security system was running and checked the footage. I showed it to an officer and made a copy. "Do you have that video?" Ashley asked. "Yes," I said, pulling a disc from the stack. I put it in the DVD player. The video showed Jolene and Steve entering the house, followed by Jessica. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "You should be in jail." "We bailed out," Jolene said. "You coming with us?" "I'm not going anywhere with you," Jessica said. "Leave now." Jolene grabbed Jessica's wrist. "You're coming with us," Jolene insisted. Jessica pulled away. "No way, I hate you," she yelled. Jolene slapped her. "Yes, you are. I have a room for you in Abilene." Jessica hit her mother back. "That's not happening," she said. Jolene grabbed her hands. "You're going to be our new star," Jolene said. Steve grinned. "The boys will like you." Jessica realized what they intended and struggled harder. "Breaking free, I'm not going, and you can't make me. Get away from me," she said. Steve pulled a weapon. "It's over for you and your brother," he said. Jolene tried to reason with him, and Jessica screamed for her grandfather. "Wait, Steve. We agreed not to do it here. Let's take them to the Indian Trail, you know the place," she said. Steve shook his head. "No," he said. "Put the weapon down before there's an accident. We'll deal with them, but not here," she insisted. They struggled. A shot rang out, followed by a louder one. I stopped the DVD. "That's when Brian called me," he said. "You know the rest." Ashley wiped her tears as I stood up. "I'm done for the day," I said. "I'm going out back for a smoke, then to the cafeteria." Ashley followed. "I'll join you," she said. We took our coffee and walked to the back porch in silence. After a while, Ashley spoke. "I forgot how dark and quiet it is here. I'm used to the city." She looked at me. "Bill, you need to deal with this before it destroys you." "Easier said than done," I replied. "How do you accept that the woman you loved lied to you for years? My kids aren't even mine." "I understand a bit," she said. "My husband was a serial cheater, but not everyone is like that." "Yeah, I know," I said quietly. Ashley hugged me. "I'm here for you, Bill, always," she said. "Thank you," I said. "I often wish we had met in high school." "I feel the same. Maybe if my dad hadn't transferred to Austin, we would have. I was even jealous of Jolene back then." "Really?" I asked. "But you were with Steve only because you and Jolene were together." I had doubts about Steve. He told me he wasn't the type to get attached. "Well, no point crying over it now," I said. "If we had gotten together, you would be a reporter in the big city." "True, but sometimes I wish I could give it all up for a good man," she said, looking at me. "I believe you would," I said. After a while, we went back inside. I lay down on the couch, still concerned about Steve's friends despite the DSS officer outside. Ashley understood. "Don't make a habit of it, cowboy," she said, smiling. I fell asleep and woke to the smell of bacon. "Rise and shine," Ashley said, standing over me in a long t-shirt. "Breakfast is ready." I went to the kitchen table, amazed at the spread: pancakes, bacon, sausage, grits, toast, eggs, cookies, and gravy. She even remembered peanut butter for the pancakes. "A guy could get used to this," I said. Ashley brought fresh coffee. "I hope you like it. It's been a while since I made breakfast for a man. It smells great." "You'll get my mom's approval," I said. "Didn't you cook like this for your husband?" "Foreman, my ex preferred fast food." "Dig in, cowboy. We have a lot to do today," she said. "So what's on the agenda?" I asked, savoring the meal. "First, I'd like to see your family, then visit Jolene's mother for insight into her. If there's time, stop by the cemetery, and we'll need to go shopping." "You're almost out of everything," she said. I devoured the food, stopping to sip coffee and praise her cooking. Jolene hadn't made breakfast like this in years. I felt like I'd died and gone to heaven. I hugged and kissed Ashley, thanking her. That was amazing. I guess I better get ready. Please do. You need a shave? She said. I showered and shaved, thinking about Ashley. In less than 24 hours, I found myself falling for her, just like in high school. Could it be that Ashley and I were meant to be? For the first time in months, I felt content. Ashley, now dressed in jeans and a t-shirt, grabbed her laptop bag and purse, ready to go. We arrived at my parents' house, greeted by the kids running out as soon as I pulled up. I introduced everyone to Ashley, and we went inside. Ashley explained her plan and asked to talk to everyone one-on-one. We all agreed. Mom went to the kitchen to make dinner, and Dad took me into the living room. Ashley started with Jessica, and then spoke with Brian. Dad and I waited, chatting about hunting, fishing, and soccer, avoiding topics related to Jolene and Steve. A couple of hours later, Ashley asked to speak with my dad. I took the kids outside to play soccer. After about an hour, she finished with both parents and joined us outside until lunch was ready. The kids bonded with Ashley, and she enjoyed spending time with us. We played soccer until Mom called us for lunch. I felt like I had a happy family again. After lunch, we said our goodbyes. Jessica hugged me before I left. Daddy, if you don't ask her to marry you, I'll kick your back, she whispered. I promised to think about it. How did the interviews go? I asked Ashley as we left. They went well, she said. I know you have trust issues, so let me explain. I interviewed everyone privately to get independent confirmation. It's not that I don't believe you, but I wanted them to speak freely. I appreciated her explanation. I understand, Ashley, you're being professional. Did you learn anything new? Yes, Jessica said Steve has been making advances toward her for a while. That son of a cow, I said. Your family loves you very much. They had suspicions about Jolene but didn't want to interfere. If they had known specifics, they would have spoken up, she said. What else did you find out? I asked. I experienced what it's like to be part of a close-knit family, and I loved it. Thank you for including me, she said. The kids and I had a great time too. You made a big impression on them, I said. We arrived at Jolene's mother, Myrna's apartment. Do you want to interview her privately too? I asked. No, I think you and she should talk, she said. Myrna opened the door and invited us in. She moved slowly due to health issues and depression. Her husband had died in a mysterious accident years ago, and Jolene's death left her alone. How are you feeling? I asked, hugging her. I'm fine, Bill. Thanks for asking, she said. She hugged Ashley. Ashley Marks, you're as beautiful now as in high school. Thank you for coming to see me, Ashley smiled as Myrna motioned for us to sit. What brings you here? She asked. I explained what Ashley was doing, and Myrna nodded approvingly. So what can I tell you? She asked. Mrs. Carter, I'm curious. Jolene and Steve's affair continued throughout her marriage. You must have known. Why didn't you say anything to Bill? Ashley asked. Myrna looked embarrassed. Yes, I knew, she said. I'm sorry, Bill. I should have told you. You didn't deserve this. How long have you known? I asked. Since the beginning, she said. During your year in Okinawa, Steve practically lived with Jolene. They were careful when your family was around. I told her it was a mistake, but she didn't listen. If Jolene wanted to be with Steve so badly, why did she marry me? I would have let her go if she had just said so, I said. She was confused, Bill. She loved you both in different ways. To her, you were stable and dependable. Steve was wild and adventurous. You were a support for her, and he was excitement, Myrna explained. I'm sorry, Myrna. Jolene had sex with Steve on our wedding day, had 2 children with him, and plotted to eliminate us. These aren't the actions of a loving wife, I said. I know it's hard to believe, Bill, Myrna said, but she did love you, at least at first. That's what she told me. What changed her so much? Ashley asked. People change over time, Ashley, Myrna said. Steve latched on to Jolene and began to control her. I warned her once, but she said I'd regret it if I told Bill. Myrna looked at me. That's why I stopped visiting the kids, Bill. I couldn't face you knowing what she was doing. Sometimes they scare me. Did you know about her feticides? Ashley asked. Myrna nodded. Yes, Jolene told me. I warned her she'd get caught, but she shrugged it off, saying it was her choice, not Bill's. I suggested she divorce Bill, but she laughed and said she'd inherit everything soon anyway. How long ago was that? Ashley asked. About 1.5 years, Myrna said. I wanted to say something, Bill, but I was scared. Steve is terrifying. Myrna, did your husband know about this? I asked. I think so, she said. They were talking just before his accident. Myrna's husband was known as an excellent mechanic, yet his brake line mysteriously failed. It's all in the past now, isn't it? Myrna said. By the way, I don't blame you for not attending the memorial. I was hoping some of her friends would come, but it was just me and the priest, she added, wiping a tear. Thank you for paying for the cremation, Bill. I noticed you had her cremated in her wedding dress. You cremated her in her wedding dress? Ashley asked. I told you I burned her dress. I made sure she wore it, and the wedding ring I gave her, it felt appropriate. Did you cremate the wedding ring too? Ashley asked. Yes, but not the engagement ring, I nodded. Thank you for making sure I got Jolene's IRA. It helped a lot, Myrna said. Jolene had an IRA? Ashley asked. Yes, when she was shot, it had $350,000. She also had $200,000 in a savings account I didn't know about. I put it in a trust for the kids' college, I said. Interesting, Ashley said, taking notes. She turned to Myrna. Is there anything else you can add? No, I think you know everything now, Myrna said. I'm sorry about how things turned out, Bill. I put my arm around her. It's okay, Myrna. Feel free to visit the kids anytime. They'd love to see you. She thanked me, hugged Ashley, and said goodbye. Don't be strangers, okay? We promised to stay in touch and left. You cremated her in her wedding dress and ring? Ashley asked as we got into the truck. It felt right at the time, I said. Ashley took notes as we drove to the cemetery. We reached the columbarium where Jolene's ashes were kept. The granite plaque read, Jolene Carter, with her birth and death years, nothing more. At least you treated her remains with dignity, Ashley said, mostly for Myrna's sake. If it were up to me, I'd flush her ashes down the toilet. Interesting, you used her maiden name, she added. She didn't value our family and life, so I didn't burden her with our name and death. They wanted me to write loving wife and mother on the plaque. I figured cheating strumpet or lying cow wouldn't fly, so I kept it simple. Ashley took her pictures and then placed her hand on my chest. There's still a lot of anger in you, isn't there? Tell me, Bill, did you ever mourn her? The truth was no, I hadn't shed a tear since she was shot. Her lies, cheating, and threats against the kids destroyed my feelings for her. Part of me was ashamed, and it brought tears to my eyes. Damn it, I didn't want to cry in front of Ashley. I turned away, but she made me face her. You need to get it out of your head, Bill, before it eats you up, Ashley said. Let it go and you can move on. What kind of life is this, Ashley? I asked. Everything I thought I had was a lie. Tears rolled down my cheeks. Ashley hugged me tightly, kissing my face occasionally. That's what happened, I sobbed uncontrollably. Ashley held me until I calmed down. I wiped a tear from her cheek. She was my friend too, remember the four of us? You, me, Steve, Jolene, the four musketeers? I loved her like a sister. I hate what she became, but I loved her anyway. You did too. You married her, raised 2 kids with her, that must mean something. You're probably right, I said. Damn right, cowboy. I'm here for you, Bill, as long as you need or want me. I get it, I told her. She smiled and patted my chest. We need to get to the store. What do you want to do about dinner? How about a trip to Charlie's for steak and a band tonight? I asked. You're asking me out in front of your wife's ashes? She smiled, kissed me, and looked at Jolene's marker. Bye, Jolene, your husband is asking me, she said. I whispered, bye, honey, to the marker and returned to the truck. Are you okay? She asked. Yeah, I said, starting the pickup. Let's get ready for tonight. We stopped by the farmer's market, bought groceries, and headed home. It finally felt like home with Ashley. I showered, shaved, and dressed, waiting for Ashley to finish getting ready. She came down in a denim skirt, white blouse, and cowboy boots. She looked stunning. I offered her my arm and we left. Charlie's restaurant was known for great steaks. After dinner, we had a beer and watched couples dance. Do you want to dance? I asked. Of course, Ashley said. We danced the night away, 2 steps, waltzes, slow dances, even line dancing. During a slow dance, Ashley kissed me deeply. I love you, Bill Jennings, she whispered. Always have and always will. I love you too, Ashley Marks, I said. She licked her lips nervously. Take me home and make love to me, cowboy, she said, or I'll pounce on you right here. Let's get this situation under control, I said, doing a bad John Wayne impression. She smiled, took my hand, and led me to the parking lot. Take me home now, she purred. She started entertaining me in the car. Thank God for tinted windows. We're almost home, I told her. Good, she whispered. We parked in the garage and rushed inside. Later, we lay on the bed, her in my arms. Just hours ago, I was a broken man. Now with Ashley, I felt hope. I knew what I wanted to do, but feared she'd think I was rushing. Screw it, I thought. Full speed ahead. A penny for your thoughts, she said, looking up at me. I don't want it to ever end, I told her. Me neither, she said. What do you propose to do about it? Her reporter instincts again, I thought. I opened the nightstand drawer and pulled out a small box, holding my great-grandmother's engagement ring. I'd had it cleaned after taking it from Jolene. Ashley focused on the box as I explained the ring's history. It had been passed down through generations, starting with my great-grandfather in World War I. You see, Ashley, this ring symbolizes my love for you and over 100 years of Jennings family history. I understand if you'd prefer a new ring, but this one means a lot, to me. Ashley, with a tear in her eye, said, Yes, I will marry you and be proud to wear your great-grandmother's ring, but there's one condition. Condition? I asked. Promise you'll cancel the vasectomy. I want to have a house full of kids. Maybe one day we can pass the ring on to one of our grandchildren. I smiled, put the ring on her finger, and we kissed before making love and falling asleep in each other's arms. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of bacon. Ashley was making another liquidator breakfast. We ate, packed for the trip to Dallas, and showered together, leading to another session of lovemaking. I called the kids to share the news. Woohoo! Brian shouted when I told them we were getting married. Jessica was just as happy. Good for you, Daddy, she said. You got a real winner. Congratulations, my dad said. Welcome to the family, Ashley. Thank you, Mr. Jennings, she said. Call me Dad, he laughed. Okay, Dad, Ashley said. I'm so excited for you too, my mom said. Have you set a date? Not yet, Ashley said. I have things to finish in Austin first, but it will be soon. Brian, I think it would be great if you and Jessica visited your Grandma Carter occasionally. She misses you. Okay, Dad, Brian said. We said our goodbyes and loaded into the truck. Something Ashley said to my mom stuck in my head. What are your plans? Long-distance relationships don't always work out, I said. Did you know Jake Carson is retiring as editor-in-chief of the Daily Record, she asked. I didn't, I said. I sent my resume last week before we met, and they want to talk to me about the job. He won't retire for 3 months, and I need 2 months to finalize things at the Statesman. What if you don't get the job, I asked. I'll quit my job and live with someone I know here, she teased. No one else is interested in the job, and the board wants a woman with my experience. I have ideas to improve circulation. Sounds like you've got it figured out, I said. I like to be prepared, she said. No matter what happens, I'll support you. She wrapped her arms around my neck. That's why I love you so much, she said. If I stayed at the Statesman, they could send me anywhere, anytime. I was tired of living in hotels. The paycheck might not go up and it might even go down. But living in one place with you is worth it. If I don't get the job, I'll write online, freelance, or maybe write a book. I'd rather spend all my time in bed with you. That's the plan I like best, I told her. Let's go outside. After closing up the house, I picked some flowers from the front garden. Mind if we make a stop? I asked. Oh, do you have a girlfriend hiding somewhere? She teased. You know better, I said. Her question still bugged me, though. You're right, I'm sorry, she said. We both got burned, so it's a sore subject. I was thinking about what you said at the cemetery. It's time to put it behind us, I said. Good for you, she replied. We pulled into the cemetery and walked to Jolene's ashes. I placed the flowers in a vase. By the way, Jolene, Ashley and I are getting married. Thought you'd like to know, I said. Ashley added, and if the kids are okay with it, I plan to adopt them. We said our goodbyes and walked back to the truck. Do you really want to adopt the kids? I asked. Hell yeah, Ashley said. They deserve a mother they can trust. Are you okay with that? Of course, I said. Marrying Ashley felt right for all of us. Jessica needed a strong, loving mother as a teenager. We drove back to Dallas mostly in silence, with Ashley working on her story. When we arrived at the hotel, she suggested, Why don't you move into my room? The paper's paying for mine until this is over. At least let me pay part of the bill, I said. You can pay for our dates, she replied. I checked out of my room and moved in with Ashley. That night, we went out for steak, danced, and enjoyed another night of passion. The next morning, we got to the courthouse early. The jurors began deliberations right away. Ashley did her job as a reporter, taking testimony and talking to observers. The jury had reached a verdict. Steve sat emotionless as the jury entered. We have a verdict, Your Honor, the foreman said, handing the verdict to the bailiff. The judge read it and asked if the verdict was unanimous. It was. In People v. Steve Jenkins, the jury finds the defendant guilty on all charges and recommends the judicial execution, the judge said. Steve's attorney had gambled on the jury being unable to unanimously agree on the judicial execution, but he lost. Steve was guilty of 6 counts of first-degree homicide, manslaughter, conspiracy to commit homicide, and various trafficking charges. Each juror confirmed their agreement with the verdict and punishment. Mr. Jenkins, I agree with the jury. If any case deserves the judicial execution, it's this one. I order you to be transferred to Huntsville State Prison and executed as prescribed by law. May God have mercy on your soul, the judge said, striking the gavel. My lawyer gestured for me to follow him. We caught up with the officers escorting Steve. Steve glared at me, defeated. What are you looking at, idiot? He spat. I'm looking at a worthless piece of crap, I said. Now I know what that looks like. My lawyer handed Steve 2 forms to sign. One relinquishes all parental rights to Brian and Jessica Jennings. The other outlines the disposition of your estate. 1/3 to Myrna Carter, 1/3 to a trust for Brian Jennings, and 1/3 to a trust for Jessica Jennings. Steve, furious but defeated, signed both forms. Are you happy now? He asked. I will be, I said. By the way, Ashley and I are getting married and she's adopting the kids. Enjoy hell. My lawyer and I left. I didn't see Steve again until his execution. Yes, I peed on his grave, but not in front of Ashley. She wouldn't have approved. Finally, the nightmare was over, and I looked forward to a new chapter with Ashley. True to her word, Ashley let me read the story she wrote about me, and I was impressed. It went viral, leading to several talk show appearances for Ashley. She even won a Pulitzer Prize for it. The Statesman was reluctant to let her go, but gave her a bonus and recommendation. When she left, the Daily Record welcomed her as the new managing editor, and within a year the paper's circulation tripled, prompting expansion and more hires. We chose a backyard wedding, inviting family and friends. Ashley's parents came from Austin with some of her friends from the Statesman. Her dad walked her down the aisle, shaking my hand warmly. Brian was my best man, and Jessica was Ashley's maid of honor, making it a family affair. After our vows, the priest introduced us as Mr. and Mrs. William Jennings. Brian put his arm around Ashley and said, "Welcome to the family, Mom," and Jessica hugged her, saying, "I love you, Mom." "I love you too," Ashley replied, hugging them both. My father handed us an envelope with 2 tickets for a week-long Caribbean cruise for our honeymoon. "Thanks, Dad," we said in unison, starting a new adventure. 10 months later, Ashley gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl. We named them William Frederick after my grandfather and Alicia Marie after Ashley's grandmother. On their birthday, I met George Mason, a local politician. He congratulated me and mentioned the upcoming election, suggesting I could take Steve's place on the commission. "You brought him down like the man who shot Liberty Valance," he said, laughing. "Except John Wayne wasn't waiting in the shadows this time." I replied, "Thanks, but I can't take a pay cut. I have 2 new mouths to feed," I said. "You could still run your business," he suggested. "Maybe, but there's another reason," I said. "Power corrupts."
Title: At a luxury spa in Paris, I surprised my wife with a couple's massage. When the masseur walked in, he was the man she'd been secretly meeting for months. Paris, the city of love, seemed like the perfect escape for Michael and his wife, Jessica. After months of strained conversations and growing distance, Michael thought this trip could reignite the spark they once had. The Eiffel Tower glittered in the background as they strolled along the Seine River, but Jessica's laughter felt forced, her gaze often shifting to her phone. Michael, determined to make this trip memorable, refused to dwell on the unease creeping into his thoughts. Michael had planned every detail meticulously. From their stay at the Four Seasons Hotel George Fifth, with its opulent suites and stunning views of the Champs-Élysées, to intimate dinners at Michelin-starred restaurants, every moment was crafted to bring them closer. Yet Jessica's frequent excuses to take a call or her nervous glances at her phone during their romantic strolls didn't go unnoticed. Hoping to create a moment of connection, Michael secretly booked a luxurious couple's massage at Le Jardin des Sens Spa, a hidden gem in Paris, known for its exquisite ambiance and world-class masseurs. This surprise was meant to be the highlight of their trip, a gesture to show Jessica he was still invested in them. The spa, nestled in the heart of Montmartre, was the epitome of serenity, with lush indoor gardens, calming scents of lavender and eucalyptus, and soft classical music echoing through its halls. As Michael led Jessica into the spa, he couldn't ignore her nervous energy. She fidgeted with her scarf, avoided his eyes, and kept checking her phone, offering excuses about needing to update their daughter back home in Los Angeles. To Michael, it was just another sign of the distance growing between them, but he brushed it aside, clinging to the hope that this massage session would help them relax and reconnect. Unbeknownst to Michael, the pieces of a larger puzzle were already falling into place. Jessica's behavior, her secretive phone calls, her reluctance to stick to the itinerary, was more than just nervous energy. As they walked into the candle-lit massage room, Michael felt a surge of optimism. But there was an underlying tension in the air, like the silence before a storm. The ambiance was perfect, the spa staff welcoming them warmly. But as the masseur entered the room, Michael's world shifted. A man in his mid-30s with a confident smile and familiarity in his eyes stepped forward. Jessica's face froze. The masseur, Pierre, was not just any stranger. He was the man Jessica had been secretly meeting for months. This moment, unexpected and heart-wrenching, would become the catalyst for everything that followed. The perfect Parisian escape Michael had planned was about to unravel in ways he could never have imagined. The luxurious entrance of Le Jardin des Sans Spa in Montmartre enveloped Michael and Jessica in an atmosphere of serenity. As they walked on the gleaming marble floors, surrounded by fragrant lavender blooms and the soft melody of Debussy's Clair de Lune playing in the background, Michael felt a surge of satisfaction. His months of planning had led to this moment, a chance to rekindle their fractured bond in the most romantic city in the world. He couldn't help but glance at Jessica, hoping to see her delight at the thoughtful surprise. When Michael turned to her and announced the couple's massage he had secretly arranged, Jessica froze for a moment, her face betraying a flicker of hesitation. "Oh, wow, this is unexpected," she stammered, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She quickly recovered, placing a hand on his arm and saying, "You always know how to surprise me." But Michael couldn't shake the feeling that her reaction wasn't genuine. He had expected laughter, maybe even a kiss of gratitude, but instead she seemed guarded, nervous even. Jessica's odd behavior didn't stop there. As they were escorted through the spa's lavish halls, past glowing candles and cascading water features, her steps felt unsteady, and she clutched her robe tightly. When they reached the waiting lounge, Jessica kept glancing at the ornate clock on the wall. "Are you okay?" Michael asked, his tone filled with genuine concern. "Yeah, I'm just overwhelmed, I guess," she replied with a weak smile, avoiding his gaze. Sinking into the plush chairs of the waiting area, Michael tried to reassure himself. Perhaps Jessica was simply embarrassed about the idea of a shared massage. Public intimacy wasn't exactly her style, after all. He noticed her fidgeting with the hem of her robe, her fingers twisting the fabric anxiously. To him, it looked like nervous energy, a natural reaction to stepping out of her comfort zone. But deep down, a shadow of doubt lingered, a quiet voice whispering that something wasn't quite right. Quite right. Still, Michael convinced himself to let it go. This was supposed to be their time to heal, to reconnect, to leave behind the growing tensions that had plagued their marriage. The spa's opulence and tranquility were everything he had hoped for, and he was determined to make the most of the experience. Little did he know, Jessica's nerves weren't about the massage itself. The calm elegance of the spa was about to be shattered, as the true reason for her unease would soon walk through the door. As Michael and Jessica were escorted into the softly lit massage suite at Le Jardin des Sans Spa, the air between them grew heavier, despite the soothing ambiance. The room was a picture of tranquility. Warm candlelight flickered against the pale beige walls, and the faint scent of jasmine mixed with lavender lingered in the air. 2 massage tables, draped in pristine white linens, were arranged side by side beneath an elegant crystal chandelier. Michael glanced at Jessica, hoping her mood might shift with the intimate setting. But she remained stiff, her fingers gripping the edge of her robe tightly. Jessica's unease became more apparent as the moments stretched on. She avoided eye contact, her eyes darting to the entrance every time footsteps echoed down the hallway. Michael, still trying to salvage the moment, teased, "Relax, Jess. It's just a massage. It's supposed to calm you, not make you jittery." She forced a laugh, her tone wavering as she replied, "I know. I guess I'm just not used to this kind of luxury." A knock at the door interrupted their conversation, and a soft-spoken spa assistant entered, informing them that their masseurs would be arriving shortly. Michael thanked her, turning to Jessica with a reassuring smile. See? Nothing to worry about. Let's just enjoy this. He moved closer, gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. For a fleeting moment, he thought he saw guilt flash across her eyes, but she quickly turned away, muttering something about needing a glass of water. Moments later, the door opened again, and a tall, well-dressed man stepped inside, exuding an air of confidence. He was introduced as Pierre, Jessica's masseur. Michael glanced at him briefly, his mind focused on the relaxing session ahead. But when he turned back to Jessica, her reaction froze him in place. Jessica's face had gone pale, her hands trembling as she stared at Pierre like she'd seen a ghost. Pierre, on the other hand, wore a faint, knowing smirk, a look that sent a chill down Michael's spine. "Bonjour," Pierre said smoothly, his tone too familiar, as though addressing an old acquaintance. Michael's stomach churned as he turned to Jessica. "Do you know him?" he asked, his voice laced with suspicion. Jessica stammered, "No, of course not. I mean, he just looks familiar." Michael's mind raced, piecing together the inconsistencies from their trip, the secretive phone calls, Jessica's constant nervousness, and her distracted behavior during their romantic Parisian outings. Pierre's smirk deepened, and Michael's chest tightened with the sudden realization that this wasn't a coincidence. The tension in the room was palpable, the serene spa atmosphere now feeling suffocating. The truth hovered just out of reach like a shadow lurking in the corners of the room. Jessica's body language screamed of discomfort, while Pierre's confidence suggested he held a card that Michael was yet to see. What was meant to be a romantic, healing moment for their relationship had turned into a confrontation brewing beneath the surface. As Michael's eyes darted between Jessica and Pierre, the cracks in his marriage began to widen, threatening to reveal secrets he wasn't prepared to face. The tranquil atmosphere of Le Jardin des Saints Spa shattered the moment the door swung open. A tall, charismatic man with a commanding presence and a charming smile stepped into the room. He wore the spa's signature uniform, but his confident stride and piercing gaze seemed out of place in the subdued luxury of the setting. Michael, sitting on the edge of the massage table, glanced up with a polite nod, ready to introduce himself. But before he could speak, his attention was drawn to Jessica's sudden and drastic change in demeanor. Jessica's previously fidgeting hands froze mid-motion, her knuckles white as she gripped the edge of her robe. Her face drained of color, her mouth slightly agape, as though she had seen a ghost. Michael furrowed his brows, watching her wide eyes lock with the masseur's. It was just a fleeting moment, but the look they exchanged carried the weight of unspoken secrets, shock, recognition, and an unmistakable pang of guilt. Michael's stomach churned. He had seen Jessica flustered before, but never like this. The air in the room grew thick with tension, a stark contrast to the lavender-scented calm that surrounded them. His instincts screamed that something was wrong. Trying to break the heavy silence, he forced a casual tone and asked, "Do you two know each other?" His question was simple, almost rhetorical, but the effect it had was profound. Jessica's reaction was immediate. She averted her gaze, stammering, "No, of course not. I've never seen him before." But her voice lacked conviction, her words rushed and unsteady. Meanwhile, the masseur, introduced moments earlier as Pierre, hesitated before responding. His smooth demeanor faltered, and for a brief second he seemed unsure of what to say. Finally, he answered, "No, sir. First time meeting." But his delivery was flat, devoid of the confidence he had walked in with. Michael's eyes darted between Jessica and Pierre, the unease in his chest growing heavier with every passing second. Jessica shifted uncomfortably in her seat, avoiding Michael's gaze as she fidgeted with the tie of her robe. Pierre, now visibly tense, moved toward the massage table, attempting to mask his discomfort by adopting a professional tone. The room, designed for relaxation and healing, had become a stage for mounting suspicion. Michael's mind raced, replaying every odd moment from their trip. Jessica's nervous glances at her phone, her frequent excuses to step away, and now this unsettling exchange. He couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't a coincidence. His gut told him there was a deeper story behind the shared glance between his wife and the masseur. The tension was palpable, like the stillness before a storm. As Michael stared at Jessica, he could see the cracks in her facade growing, her composure unraveling under the weight of her own guilt. Pierre, too, seemed unable to meet Michael's piercing gaze. The once idyllic spa day Michael had planned to reconnect with his wife was now veering into uncharted territory, setting the stage for a confrontation that could shatter everything he thought he knew. As Pierre stepped out of the massage suite, Michael sat in a heavy silence, his mind racing to piece together the puzzle that had been forming throughout their Paris trip. The clues, previously scattered and dismissed, now came into sharp focus. Jessica's distant behavior, her frequent calls during romantic dinners, her unease about the itinerary, and now her pale, guilty expression when Pierre walked in. The luxurious spa, with its soft, lavender-scented air and marble elegance, now felt suffocating, its tranquility mocking the storm brewing inside Michael. Michael's sharp instincts refused to let this moment slide. He turned to Jessica, his voice calm but carrying the weight of suspicion. "What's going on, Jessica? Don't lie to me." His words sliced through the tension, and for a moment, Jessica tried to hold her composure. "Nothing's going on," she said, her voice trembling as she avoided his gaze. But Michael wasn't buying it. Her fidgeting hands and faltering voice only fueled his determination. "This isn't adding up," he continued, his voice firmer now. "Your calls, your constant excuses, and the way you froze when he walked in. What aren't you telling me?" Jessica tried to deny it, shaking her head, but Michael's relentless questioning chipped away at her defenses. Finally, the facade broke. Tears welled up in Jessica's eyes as she whispered, "I didn't mean for it to happen." Her voice cracked, and the confession spilled out like a dam bursting. She admitted that her so-called work trips over the past few months had been an elaborate cover for secret meetings with Pierre. She spoke of how she'd met him during a prior spa visit in California and how their connection had spiraled into something she couldn't control. The weight of her betrayal hung in the air, suffocating any hope of reconciliation. Before Michael could fully process the betrayal, the door opened, and Pierre walked back in, holding a tray with aromatherapy oils. He stopped mid-step, sensing the charged atmosphere in the room. Michael's piercing gaze turned toward him, his voice deceptively calm. "You can drop the act. She's already told me everything." Pierre's confident demeanor dissolved in an instant. His jaw tightened, and he stood frozen, the tray trembling slightly in his hands. The tension was electric, as the spa's soothing background music became an ironic contrast to the chaos unfolding within. Jessica buried her face in her hands, sobbing quietly, while Pierre struggled to find the words to respond. Michael's calm exterior belied the storm of anger and heartbreak raging inside him. He stood, towering over the now speechless Pierre, and added, "I trusted her. And you knew exactly what you were doing." His words were heavy with both contempt and disappointment. The once idyllic Parisian spa day had transformed into a battlefield of betrayal, setting the stage for decisions that would forever change the course of their lives. Michael stood in the spa suite, the weight of Jessica's betrayal still fresh as his piercing gaze locked onto Pierre. The room was thick with tension, the calming lavender scent and soft music now a cruel backdrop to the chaos within. Michael's calm yet stern voice shattered the silence. "You've been meeting my wife for months. Care to explain yourself?" Pierre, visibly rattled but attempting to maintain his composure, set the tray of oils down with shaking hands. "It wasn't serious," he began, his French-accented voice faltering under Michael's glare. "It meant nothing. We didn't think it would hurt anyone." His words were meant to diffuse the situation, but they only added fuel to the fire. Michael's expression hardened as he cut Pierre off. "Nothing? Months of lying and sneaking around, and you call it nothing?" The accusation hung in the air like a thunderclap, drawing Jessica further into her spiral of silent sobs. The escalating voices pierced through the serene ambiance of the luxury spa, drawing the attention of the staff. A young receptionist, accompanied by a manager in a tailored suit, softly knocked on the door before stepping in hesitantly. "Pardon me," the manager said in a professional tone, "but we must ask you to keep it down for the comfort of our other guests." His calm demeanor clashed with the heated emotions in the room. Michael exhaled deeply, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. With a cold, resolute tone, he turned to Jessica. "We're done here. Enjoy the rest of the massage. Alone." His words cut through the room like a dagger, leaving Jessica stunned and speechless. Without another glance, Michael brushed past the staff and strode out of the suite, his footsteps echoing on the polished marble floors. As he exited the spa, the cool Parisian air hit his face, offering a momentary reprieve from the suffocating emotions inside. The Eiffel Tower loomed in the distance, its twinkling lights mocking the shattered trust that had brought him to this moment. Michael's heart was heavy, weighed down by a mix of anger, heartbreak, and the painful clarity that his marriage was beyond repair. Walking away, Michael resolved to prioritize his own self-respect and sanity over trying to salvage a relationship built on lies. Each step he took away from the spa felt like a step toward reclaiming his dignity. The city of love had turned into a city of heartbreak, but as he disappeared into the Parisian streets, Michael knew he deserved better. As Michael wandered aimlessly through the cobbled streets of Paris, the weight of the evening settled over him like the city's soft winter fog. The Eiffel Tower sparkled in the distance, its beauty mocking the turmoil in his heart. What was supposed to be a romantic getaway, a chance to mend the fractures in his marriage, had instead shattered it completely. The luxurious spa, the thoughtful surprises, and even the magical allure of Paris itself had only served to highlight how far he and Jessica had drifted apart. Michael's thoughts spiraled as he pieced everything together. The secretive phone calls, Jessica's distant glances, and her over-the-top excitement about work trips to New York. This betrayal wasn't born overnight. It had been festering beneath the surface for months, maybe even years. Paris hadn't created the cracks in their relationship. It had simply illuminated them under the harsh light of reality. Sitting on a quiet bench overlooking the Seine River, Michael reflected on how much he had ignored the warning signs. Jessica's hesitation when they first landed in Paris, her constant excuses, and the unease he had dismissed as travel nerves. Each moment now felt like a clue he had chosen to overlook in his desperate attempt to hold on to something already slipping away. For the first time, Michael allowed himself to acknowledge the truth. This betrayal wasn't just about Jessica and Pierre. It was about a marriage that had been eroding long before they set foot in Paris. Jessica's affair was merely the final act of a relationship built on shaky foundations. As the cold breeze carried the distant hum of Parisian nightlife, Michael made a decision. He wouldn't let this betrayal define him. The trip to Paris, though painful, had given him the clarity he needed to move forward. Not with Jessica, but with himself. He had tried to rekindle a flame that was already extinguished, but now he understood that his worth wasn't tied to saving a broken relationship. Michael stood up, taking one last look at the glittering Eiffel Tower, and began walking toward his hotel. The city of love had shown him the harsh realities of betrayal, but it had also gifted him a new resolve to rebuild his life, this time with honesty and self-respect at the center. Thank you for being a part of this story with me. If it moved you, please give the video a thumbs up and consider subscribing to Narrative Stories. I've noticed many of you who enjoy
My girlfriend and I crossed paths in a unique and sad way. It happened during Hurricane Katrina when her husband tragically died, and their entire house was swept away by the force of nature. The news was full of sad stories, and I was deeply concerned about their fate, but I had no idea that fate had a surprise in store for me. On a regular Sunday, I found myself in church, unaware of an unexpected encounter awaiting me. Our church had become a refuge for many families affected by the hurricane. The pastor's call for volunteers to provide temporary shelter to these families struck a chord with me. At first, the idea of opening my home to strangers was daunting, but as the pastor spoke, he shed light on a truth I hadn't realized. Many of us, including me, are often away from home due to work, leaving our homes empty most of the time. The pastor's words resonated with me because my new job as a doctor's assistant required long hours and frequent absence from home. Considering my situation, I realized that I recently bought a spacious house with 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. Given my busy work schedule, it made sense to offer temporary housing to those in need. In my mind, they would use a guest room as a safe haven on their journey to stability. The empty space in my house seemed like an opportunity I had overlooked as I focused on my job. Additionally, I believed that doing a good deed might lead to positive outcomes in my own life. At 29, I was a single man facing dating challenges. Despite my efforts, the women I liked didn't reciprocate, and those I got along with turned out to be incompatible. Recognizing this, I decided to live alone and wait for the right person. With renewed determination, I volunteered to offer shelter to a family in need. When I offered to help, my pastor introduced me to a 28-year-old widow, radiating beauty, who had lost her husband in Hurricane Katrina. She had 2 young daughters, aged 5 and 7, and their story deeply moved me. When I met her, my heart was touched, and we immediately connected. Her sincerity, kindness, and compatibility confirmed I had made the right decision. She and her children settled into my house quickly, and I ensured their comfort by buying new furniture, electronics, and groceries. In the first few days, work kept me busy, and I almost forgot about the people in my house. But the following morning, I returned from a business trip to a pleasant surprise. There was a soft knock on my bedroom door, and the smell of a freshly cooked breakfast filled the air. Opening the door, I was greeted by her smiling face as she brought a tray of scrambled eggs, sizzling bacon, and a cup of hot coffee to the table. All irritation disappeared as I embraced the gesture with gratitude. Breakfast in bed, a cherished childhood memory, became a regular occurrence. She treated me with great care, even tying my shoelaces before I left for work. Her children were well-mannered and addressed me with respect, calling me Dad. I became attached to them and hoped to adopt them someday. They not only took care of me, but also cleaned the house and cooked meals with the money I provided. She eventually got a job, showing her determination to be independent. Over time, she transformed from a guest into a family member in my house. We developed a strong bond, and I found myself deeply attached to her and her children. While I knew she wouldn't live with me permanently due to her job, I wished she could stay longer. The days passed quickly, and her presence became an integral part of my life. Our house radiated warmth and satisfaction when she and her children were around. Deep down, I understood that she would eventually gain independence and establish her own home. I wished her success and happiness, but the thought of her leaving stirred conflicting emotions in me. As our bond deepened, the chemistry and connection between us became evident. We found excuses to touch each other around the house, creating a strong attraction. Even simple moments, like when she cooked in the kitchen and I stood behind her, sparked desire. One evening, as we watched a late-night show and laughed together, she leaned over and rested her head on my shoulder, deepening our connection. Emotions took over, and we shared a passionate kiss, igniting further closeness on the couch. Since that night, she became more than a woman seeking refuge in my house. Our physical closeness grew, and I cherished every moment together. However, she still lived in the guest room, and the direction of our relationship remained uncertain. She had her doubts, and I respected her boundaries. In just 3 months, she landed a job as a cashier at the nearby grocery store, which marked a crucial step toward her independence. While I willingly shouldered the financial responsibilities, covering all the expenses, she used her earnings to support her children's kindergarten and buy clothes. It felt like a partnership built on love and mutual understanding, and I was prepared to keep helping her as much as I could. I stood by her side, offering unwavering support as she worked to rebuild her life. As Christmas approached, I invited her and her kids to celebrate the holiday with my family, introducing her as my girlfriend. I was relieved when my mother warmly welcomed them. She cared deeply for her and her children. However, in private, my mother shared her concerns with me. She reminded me of her children from a previous marriage and suggested I consider finding a partner without such responsibilities. Her words made me contemplate the nature of our relationship. The challenges ahead were undeniable. This relationship was unlike any I'd encountered before. It involved not only our connection, but also the integration of her children into my life. Despite my mother's warnings, I couldn't ignore the deep bond between us and the love I had for her and her children. After a heart-to-heart conversation with my mother about my girlfriend and her children, I realized her worries stemmed from love. She only wanted what's best for me. I reassured my mother, acknowledging her care and guidance, but I couldn't disregard the profound love I found in this incredible woman and her children. I reminded her that she longed for me to be in a relationship, and now she appeared concerned about the added responsibilities. In my eyes, my girlfriend was everything I ever dreamed of. She remained the same loving and compassionate person I met 4 months ago, without any major issue. She exemplified the qualities of a responsible and caring mother for her children, and I couldn't ask for more. Her inner and outer beauty continued to captivate me, and my love for her deepened every day. Her presence filled my life with positivity and rejuvenation, especially after returning from work trips. Being with her and her children brought me joy and happiness that felt surreal. Our connection was genuinely extraordinary, and I couldn't imagine my life without her. Despite the strong daily bond we shared, she consistently chose to sleep in the guest room. On one of these evenings, I mustered the courage to ask why she preferred not to spend the night in my bed. Her unexpected response made me feel guilty for bringing up such a sensitive topic. She delicately explained that she hadn't spent a night in someone else's bed since her late husband passed away. Her words carried both tenderness and pain, making me regret broaching the subject. I hugged her tightly at that moment, understanding the depth of her emotions. I realized she needed time and understanding to heal from the pain of her past. Recognizing this, I gladly gave her the space she needed. However, one evening, upon returning home from work, a strange suspicion crept in again. I noticed that my beloved cashew nuts and malt from the refrigerator had been eaten. This puzzled me, because my girlfriend and her children had no interest in these snacks. In fact, my girlfriend disliked them due to their high-calorie content. Since I knew she wasn't a fan of cashews and malt, it seemed unlikely that she was responsible for their disappearance. Rather than confront her about it, I decided not to make a big deal out of it. Yet, curiosity got the better of me, and I jokingly asked her 7-year-old daughter, with whom I often exchanged playful banter. To my surprise, she mentioned a name I had never heard before and accused this mysterious man of being the snack thief. At first, I thought it was just another playful exchange, but her serious tone and detailed account caught me off guard. It was evident she wasn't joking. According to her, a specific person came to our house when I was away for work, even staying overnight with her mother. She expressed strong disapproval of this man, leaving me in shock. The underlying message in her words was incredible, because the thought of my girlfriend being unfaithful had never crossed my mind. I trusted her completely and couldn't fathom her being unfaithful. A whirlwind of emotions, from disbelief to anger and eventually a headache, overwhelmed me. As the truth unfolded, the weight of her daughter's words instilled undeniable certainty and drove me to search for concrete evidence. Driven by the need to uncover the reality of what transpired during my 3-day absence from work, I resorted to installing hidden cameras on the porch and in the living room, discreetly recording. I anxiously awaited my return, mentally preparing for the painful truth that awaited me. As I delved into the footage, the shocking truth lay bare before me. I witnessed a man coming to my house during my absence, brazenly spending the night with my girlfriend. To make matters worse, he shamelessly indulged in my beloved nuts and malt, and even had the audacity to claim my chair. The sight of this uninvited guest assuming my role in the sanctity of my own home filled me with anger and a sense of betrayal. It was a painful truth to accept, realizing that my girlfriend had deceived me in such a profound way. Following this heart-wrenching revelation, my heart shattered into pieces, and I felt like a complete fool for having placed such unwavering trust in her. The pain and devastation were too intense to immediately confront her. I needed time to process the betrayal and come to terms with the harsh reality that now loomed over our once loving relationship. I tried to understand why she had chosen to hurt me so deeply, considering that I had invested all my emotional and physical strength into our relationship. In the days that followed, my emotions were constantly in turmoil as I embarked on a journey of deep self-reflection. It was challenging for me to comprehend the person she had become and the reasons behind her betrayal. The strong love that once bound us was now broken. My mind kept replaying our shared moments, desperately seeking any hints of her betrayal, but this only intensified my confusion and deepened the wounds of betrayal. Filled with disappointment and distrust towards women, I began mentally distancing myself from relationships. When I finally gathered the courage to confront her about the hidden camera recording, emotions overwhelmed me, creating a tense atmosphere. I called her into my room and suggested we watch the video. As we watched, tears streamed down her face, and she pleaded with me, admitting that this was not the way she wanted me to discover the truth. Overwhelmed with emotions, I insisted on knowing the identity of the man caught on the video. She explained that he was her ex-boyfriend from New Orleans, who had sought refuge in a shelter after surviving a devastating flood. I was taken aback when she disclosed that he would visit our house in my absence. My confusion deepened because I had believed her before. When she claimed she had never cheated, it became painfully clear that her words about loyalty to her late husband were fiction, as spending a night with another man shattered this illusion. This revelation cast doubt on other truths I held dear. As she continued revealing her secrets, it became apparent that she had become pregnant at a young age, but the father of her children abandoned her. When she explained why she lied about her husband's passing away, I was shocked to my core. She admitted she wanted to see how people treated the bereaved and craved the sympathy and support a widow received. At that moment, I was hit with a wave of bewilderment, realizing that the woman I had welcomed into my life and home was a stranger. The weight of betrayal crushed me, eroding trust and security in our relationship. Overcome by fear and uncertainty, I found the courage to make the painful decision to ask her to leave my house that evening. In the web of deceit she had spun, I could find no solace or peace because I could no longer hide the person responsible for such a web of lies. While the severity of her deception warranted immediate expulsion, a sense of responsibility for her 2 daughters tugged at my heart. I couldn't bear the thought of leaving innocent children without a roof over their heads, especially considering they had been ensnared in their mother's lies. Empathy compelled me to protect and care for them. It was with a heavy heart that I informed her she had to leave my house the next day. But I couldn't simply abandon the children to their fate. Instead, I made it my mission to secure their well-being. I made the firm decision to rent an apartment for an extended stay, providing them with temporary shelter and stability. My intent was driven solely by compassion for her daughters, devoid of any remnants of affection for her. If it had been just her, I wouldn't have hesitated to send her away the same evening. Watching them leave was emotionally challenging, as I knew the sacrifices I had made to ensure a safe place for them. It served as a stark reminder of the depth of deception and its impact on innocent lives. I felt a heavy heart when I realized I had become emotionally attached to her daughters, viewing them as my own. They had become undeserving participants in this situation, and I couldn't accept that they would suffer the consequences of their mother's deceit. It was not an easy decision, but I believed it was the right one. Reflecting on the situation, I couldn't help but wonder if her affection for me had been genuine or just another facet of her lies. The uncertainty weighed on me, but I took solace in the fact that I had uncovered the truth, however little comfort it offered me at the time. The thought of starting a family with someone who had deceived me sent shivers down my spine. I was immensely grateful that the truth had come to light, saving me from potential consequences in the future. I made a resolute decision to exercise caution in relationships, giving priority to honesty and transparency. This experience left me with a whirlwind of emotions, but also provided a valuable lesson on safeguarding my heart and making informed choices. I also asked for permission to see her daughters and spend time with them in parks. To my surprise, she agreed. As time passed, I continued to work diligently and tried to spend quality time with the girls, picking them up once a week and enjoying our moments together. One day, while dining at a cafe, her older daughter mentioned that her mother had been looking unwell and acting strangely. At first, I didn't think much of her words, but when she revealed that her mom was probably sick because she gave herself a daily injection in her leg, I was taken aback. It hit me, and I understood what this meant. I reassured the girl, telling her that her mom would get better soon. I didn't know how to protect the girls from their mother, who was using illegal substances, and I consulted with my mother. She advised me to report the situation to the Child Protection Services, which I did. However, I didn't want the children to be left without warmth and love in a shelter. So I informed the Child Protection Services that I intended to adopt the girls, hoping for my mother's support. 6 months have passed since that day when my ex-girlfriend lost her parental rights. The girls spent about 2 months in a shelter, which deeply saddened me. But I managed to adopt the girls, and I felt joy. My mother supported my decision and provided all possible help in raising my newfound daughters.
I'm currently feeling really lost in my situation and need some guidance. My wife and I have been married for 17 years. We're both in our late 30s and early 40s, and we've known each other for about 23 years since high school. Here's what I know. 3 days ago, my wife came home from work, but she had to work on the 4th day. She seemed very upset and quickly packed an overnight bag before leaving. Our oldest daughter witnessed this. I tried talking to my wife, but she was too upset to speak and was in tears. She seemed almost panicked. She hasn't responded to any of our calls or texts. I contacted her parents and they eventually told me she's safe with them and asked for patience and understanding. That's all I know. I also tried reaching out to her sister, brother, and a close work friend. Her brother had no information, and her work friend said she was at work in the morning but disappeared by lunch 3 days ago. It's been 3 days now with no contact from my wife, not even with the kids. Nobody is telling us anything, and I'm here with our 3 daughters, trying to manage without her. The kids keep asking what's going on with mom, but all I can say is that she's at her parents' house, and we need to be patient and understanding. I have a strong urge to pack up the kids and drive to her parents' house without warning. It's only a 3-hour drive, and waiting here in uncertainty is agonizing. The kids think we had a big fight and are getting a divorce, but that's far from the truth. We never fight, and the kids know that. I don't know what's happening, and my emotions are all over the place as I try to handle everything without her. If something tragic happened, wouldn't her family be the first to tell me? Maybe some past trauma resurfaced, but if it were me, I'd turn to my wife for support. We're in the dark and nothing makes sense. I'm at a loss for what to do, just sitting here with the girls, feeling worried, scared, angry, and every other emotion in this situation. Can anyone offer a logical perspective and clarity on this? I'm stuck in a cycle of confusion due to my emotional state. Update. It turns out my wife had an affair. It was a long night, and I didn't sleep much. I don't expect to spend much time on the computer today, but I did read all the posts yesterday and into the night, and I'll eventually read the responses today. Here's what I know. My father-in-law didn't call me last night, so I eventually contacted the police as many of you suggested. It turns out my wife had been having an affair for at least 2 years. Probably longer. The other man had a heart attack on Tuesday and passed away that night. My mother-in-law, and likely my sister-in-law, knew about it and were covering for her. Still, no contact from my wife, neither to me nor the girls. I'm trying to keep this information from them for now. I honestly don't know what to do from here. That's all I know, and it's almost unbearable. Please keep us in your thoughts and prayers. Responding to a commenter, my oldest daughter knows about the affair. She's very sharp, and we had a long talk last night. My mom knows and plans to stay with us this week. I took time off work, and my boss, who's also a close friend, knows about the situation, which is a relief. Any support I can get right now is valuable. Responding again, yes, your assumptions are correct. My wife had an affair with an older divorced man, and the situation escalated quickly because of his wake funeral. The wake occurred the same night I called the police, so you can imagine how complicated it became. Many details are still unfolding, and I appreciate the support from everyone. I might share more about this eventually. It feels like I could write a book at this point. We've been in touch with everyone, but it's still a challenging situation. I don't drink and am trying to eat, although sleep is elusive. My priority is making sure my girls are okay. Reddit helps me relax in these difficult times. Providing more information, it's been just over a week since my D-Day, Discovery Day. Since then, I've learned that my wife's affair had been going on for over 4 years, though I still don't have the exact timeline. It likely started emotionally and then became physical. I'm curious about how the pandemic and lockdowns played a role in this situation, but I may not get all the answers. Yesterday, my in-laws unexpectedly visited their grandkids. My wife has been staying at their house since this ordeal began, which is frustrating. They only spent about 15 minutes with the girls before asking to speak with me privately. The conversation was long and complicated, but in summary, my wife wants to come home but is afraid of facing the consequences of her actions. Her parents tried to convince me to forgive her and rebuild the marriage, but I lied and said I wasn't sure about my future plans, as I intend to get a divorce. But I worry that if I disclose this, my wife won't be honest with me, and I might never learn the truth. However, I do want her to sit down with me and explain everything if that's possible. We've been together for over 17 years, including our time since high school, with 3 kids, countless memories, and shared experiences. I want her to look me in the eyes and tell me the whole story. I also want my children to see that I gave her a chance to explain herself and apologize, trying to handle things like mature adults. I'm striving to choose a path that sets the best example for my kids. I'm unsure if I'm doing it right, though. Legally, I can't prevent my wife from coming back to our home, as the lawyer has clarified. Even though I don't want it right now, if she decides to return, I can't stop her. My daughters and I have established a nice routine, so I made a demand I thought would be difficult to meet. I told her she could come home when she sat down with me in person, looked me in the eyes, and openly discussed her affair from start to finish, answering all my questions honestly. She also needed to apologize to the girls in person and address their questions. I thought it was fair, considering they already know. Legally, she can return home without meeting these demands, but if she's afraid to face us, maybe we can use that to our advantage. Is this approach wrong? I'm not trying to be sneaky or dishonest. I just don't want to start living together yet if I can delay it, especially with a mandatory 90-day waiting period for divorce in our state. Her return is inevitable and we'll both need to resume work eventually, regardless of this situation. I prefer to prolong it so I can plan and improve my mental and emotional well-being. My wife has been texting our daughters, claiming she doesn't want a divorce, and repeatedly apologizing to them. They've shared the texts with me and ask about me daily. It seems that the reality of her actions is hitting her hard, especially in the last few days. How should I handle this? Was my demand unreasonable? It sounds like my wife may come home sooner than I expected. Right now, I feel confident in my current path. I'm not shaken by this because I anticipated it happening eventually. My priority is making the best decision for my daughters and myself as we move forward. I want to thank everyone who has offered encouragement, advice, and support. In response to a question about reconciliation, I appreciate your outreach. During the first day or two after discovering the affair, I was unsure about getting a divorce, but my emotions clouded my judgment. As I began to recall the lies about her girls' weekend trips, late nights due to traffic, and work-related travel, I realized the extent of her deception. Every day, I uncover new lies that were meant to deceive me and our daughters, so she could be with this other man. I apologize for the length of this response, but I needed to express these thoughts. The weekend was terrible, but my wife returned home yesterday, following a build-up throughout the week. In the past, I would have greeted her with a hug and a kiss when she entered, but this time there was an incredibly uncomfortable silence between us. She tried to hug me, but I turned away as if nothing had happened. After she settled in, I naturally asked her to tell me everything, and she again said she wasn't ready. We had the same result when we spoke on the phone earlier in the week. I insisted that her only condition for returning home was to explain her nearly 3-week absence to the family because of her love for us. However, she kept repeating that she wasn't ready for that. It was challenging not to lose my temper, but I took deep breaths to regain my composure. Unfortunately, I failed, and in frustration, I blurted out that she had been having a 4-year affair with a coworker, planned to leave me for him, and had cut ties with her entire family. And now, she walked in without fulfilling the one condition I had asked for, and told her I wanted a divorce. This is when things took a bizarre turn. Her body language and facial expression showed that she had no idea how much I knew about her affair. She looked at me with wide eyes and then stood in the kitchen, staring at the floor, saying nothing. She remained stoic, and I didn't expect this reaction. I thought she might react emotionally, confess tearfully, blame the affair on me, or suggest a serious conversation to work things out. But her response was silence. We stood in the kitchen in absolute silence for what felt like 5 minutes, and it was the strangest moment I've ever experienced. She seemed at a loss for words, and so was I. I had prepared myself for all possible scenarios for this confrontation, except for this one. So, I decided to outline everything I knew about her affair, even adding some of my assumptions about how she met her affair partner, her sister's involvement, and what happened during COVID. She continued to stare at the floor throughout my explanation. I grew angrier as I spoke because she remained silent. I did my best not to raise my voice or become obscene. Eventually, I composed myself, and there was another prolonged, awkward silence. My anger turned into sadness as I realized the gravity of the situation. I softly asked her what I had done to drive her away, if she had ever loved me, and if the affair was worth it. Still, she didn't respond, showing no tears, no apology, no shouting, and no explanation. She just stood there with her head down. This silence hurt even more than D-Day did. I kept staring at her, unsure of what to do. And then it got worse. Our daughters had overheard the entire encounter, and I feel incredibly foolish. I'd been so focused on putting their needs first over the past few weeks that I didn't consider their whereabouts when confronting my wife. Our oldest daughter stormed downstairs and expressed a lot of pent-up anger. My wife quickly ran upstairs and locked herself in the bedroom. That's where we are now. I heard my wife crying for most of the night until I fell asleep. Only our youngest daughter has attempted to talk to her, while the rest of us have avoided her. If I can muster the courage, I plan to suggest that my wife stays with her sister until we finalize the divorce. However, this is still her home, and it would be miserable for all of us to cohabit with her. I was wrong about my wife, and all of you were right. I was wrong about our years together, the memories, and the significant moments in our life. I was convinced she would beg for forgiveness and confess to everything to absolve her guilt. This is the same woman who once drove back to a farmer's market to return $10 in change she had been given by mistake. But it seems we're not worth that effort to her. Maybe we never were. Now what? Today at home was incredibly uncomfortable. My daughters and I tried to continue as we have for the past 2 weeks, but it's not the same. I just want to fast forward through all of this, past the divorce, the awkward conversations, the inevitable arguments and fights, and the drama. For those who had to live with their unfaithful spouse, how did you manage? Especially with kids. I know this is just the beginning, and I keep reading posts that promise it gets better, but I feel so far from that point. I constantly feel like screaming or crying. I'm trying my best to stay emotionally stable for my daughters, but I don't know if I can keep it up for 3 months. School will start soon, and this is my life now. Thank you all for your support and advice. I've been in a tough situation ever since my unfaithful wife returned home after I discovered her affair. I've been trying to put on a facade for my daughters, saying and thinking the right things. However, tonight I have to be honest about my feelings. As many of you mentioned daily, the emotions come in waves, and tonight I was hit hard, causing me to lose my composure a bit. I've already filed for divorce, but my wife, who had the affair, hasn't hired a lawyer yet. I'm trying to be patient and handle this delicately, as I see the possibility of an uncontested divorce where we handle most things ourselves. But after tonight, I'm not sure anymore. During the week, we've been living together, but on Friday nights, my wife goes to her sister's house and returns on Sunday nights. This routine has involved mostly avoiding each other, with occasional interactions between myself and the girls. Unfortunately, my oldest daughter and my wife have had some heated arguments, so they're not speaking to each other. Lately, I've been following the advice I've received here and elsewhere. I've been working hard on controlling my emotions around my wife, even though it's challenging. I've kept my interactions with her brief and indifferent, though always polite and respectful. However, tonight was different. For the past couple of Fridays, my wife would come home from work, prepare for her weekend at her sister's, and leave before I got home from work. But not tonight. She was waiting for me in the kitchen when I arrived. I tried to walk past her, but she grabbed my hand lightly and questioned my treatment of her, just because she's not ready to discuss her affair. This was the first time she even mentioned her cheating since everything came to light nearly a month ago. I tried to hold back, I promise I did. I attempted to keep my cool and walk away, but our daughters were not home at the time, and anger overwhelmed me. So I let out all my frustrations, pains, hurts, and rage. I told her everything, and I can't even estimate how long I went on. At times, my voice grew loud, and I got animated. I poured out all my emotions and the torment I've been experiencing. I could have written a 4,000-word post with all the things I said. Once I started, I couldn't stop. I cried and got emotional, and I was so angry with myself afterward. I had been doing well, and I let her get to me. I knew it would happen, and it did. I'm disappointed in myself. I've been holding in my feelings for a while, and the weight room can only do so much. For the first time, my wife also broke down and got emotional, sobbing uncontrollably. Surprisingly, I found some satisfaction in seeing her hurt like I have been. She mumbled apologies repeatedly during my outburst, and she couldn't say anything else as I left the kitchen, asking her to leave me alone. The girls came home about half an hour later and sensed that something had happened, but I wasn't ready to discuss it. And I don't think they need to know. The younger ones have been doing better, and I don't want to hinder their progress. Telling my oldest would only add to her anger, which I want to avoid. I hate this situation so much. I should have kept my composure. I should have ignored my wife and walked past her. Looking back, it seems like she wanted to start a conversation about her affair, but didn't know how. And it didn't go far because of my explosion. I've actually started worrying about her. I know some of you will criticize me for this, but I don't want any harm to come to her. She's been isolated and alone with her thoughts, with nearly everyone turning their back on her. You can say she deserves it, and that's true, but she's still a human being and the mother of my children. This is a setback for me, and I'm really disappointed in myself. I apologize for the long rant. I called my brother and vented to him too. I'll try to start over on Monday. I'm only human. Venting on her felt good, but now I'm feeling regret. Should I text my wife or should I just leave it be? My wife hasn't left me alone all week. She's been overly nice, continuously apologizing for her affair, crying and trying to engage me, even knocking on my door at night to talk. I've ignored her at times but spoken when I felt like it. However, I finally snapped at her on Wednesday night, telling her to leave me alone. Then something happened last night. Just over a month since my soon-to-be ex-wife returned home after her affair was revealed, things have gotten more uncomfortable as we cohabit. She came into my room last night after our daughters had gone to bed, asking to talk privately, which was different from how she'd been approaching me all week. I resisted at first, but eventually, we went to the garage and sat in my car to avoid arguing in front of the kids. I apologize for the length of this, but she told me everything. According to her, we talked for almost 3 hours. I'm not sure how much I should share. I stayed up all night listening to her cry for hours. I couldn't sleep, and I went through a cycle of crying, anger, resisting the urge to confront her, and repeating. Forgive me if I take a day or so to respond to anyone, but I needed to get this off my chest and try to get some sleep. Having my wife constantly apologize and beg for another chance all evening hasn't helped. Tonight, I had to leave for a few hours just to get away from her because being around her is incredibly painful. On a different note, she was introduced to her affair partner by her sister about 5 years ago, with no romantic intentions initially. He was a higher up at a company she wanted to work for and currently works at, which is how he helped her get the job. Her desire to change jobs was unrelated to her affair, but once she did, she had extra motivation. After she got the job, her affair partner began flirting with her. It started with texting, then progressed to exchanging pictures and more texting, and eventually became physical just before COVID hit. She confessed to her sister and initially wanted to come clean to me but decided to bury it and keep quiet. She claimed to have gone no contact with her affair partner soon after, but as lockdowns and restrictions eased, he reached out to her, and she resumed talking to him. When businesses reopened, the physical side of the affair also resumed. She admitted to ending the affair a couple of times out of guilt, but kept going back to him, so it never really ended. She had detailed notes about her affair timeline, which she read to me, answering questions along the way. She lied about weekend trips with the girls, work-related travel, traffic jams, issues with her parents, shopping trips, and more. There were so many lies that I believed every word, never questioning anything. These lies were a cover for her affair? Hearing all of this made me feel even worse, as many of you had predicted. However, her affection for me didn't decrease during the affair. She didn't become distant, as is often the case. Intimacy did change, but not enough to raise red flags. She confessed to falling in love with her affair partner and wanting a life with him. He was older, divorced, single, and promised her expensive gifts, vacations, and other luxuries. She started daydreaming about escaping her family responsibilities, and the thrill of being with him was too tempting to resist. She spoke candidly, with a lot of emotion, and appeared honest. Midway through her confession, I lost my composure and started crying. It was painful to hear everything, as expected. When she finished, she told me how much she loved me, always had, and was willing to do anything to save our marriage. Many of you had predicted this, but it felt disingenuous to me, as if rehearsed. I've been with her for over half my life, and I can tell when she's not being genuine. Maybe I'm wrong, but it doesn't matter. I managed to compose myself better than last week, though I still got angry and said some unkind things, including pointing out that her affair partner was seeing multiple women, and she was just one of many to him. This seemed to upset her greatly. I had thought of a million things to say when she finally confessed, all the one-liners and responses I might throw at her. But in that emotional moment, I couldn't think of most of them. However, I knew I would ask one thing. If she had to choose between her affair partner and me, who would she pick? She hesitated and then mumbled, "That's not fair." I pressed her, and eventually she said she would choose me, of course. I told her that her hesitation was the reason I was divorcing her, as it showed she was lying again. She started sobbing, and that was the last thing she said. We sat in the car for a while with her continuing to cry, but I was tired. I eventually told her that we're divorcing and that, for the sake of our daughters, we owe it to them to co-parent civilly and be present in their lives. I also added that, given all the pain she put me through, I hoped she could handle the divorce amicably, which would demonstrate her love for me. The last thing I said, borrowed from something online, was that I kissed her on the forehead and told her I would have loved her forever. Then, I got out of the car and went to bed. That's where things stand for now. Her chance to contest the divorce has passed, but I haven't spoken to my lawyer yet. I find myself crying again and cycling through depression and anger phases. Hearing everything last night was incredibly difficult, and I could have done without it. Now that I know she could have lied or made it all up, who knows? But it aligned with everything I had pieced together in the past month. So, that's the current situation. This feels never-ending. I have a few good days, start feeling strong, and then something else happens. It feels like it's been months, yet only days at the same time. I'm going to try to sleep. Imagine the love of your life, the only person you've ever loved or kissed, telling you she cheated for over 4 years simply because she was bored. There were no issues in our relationship. She was just bored. I don't know if that makes it worse or better. Thanks for reading and for your support along the way. It's been a rough couple of nights. Very tough. I promise to make an effort to respond tomorrow after I get some sleep.
I exposed my cheating wife's lies, took everything from her, and left her with nothing but regret. I reflected on the recent weeks, struggling to pinpoint any specific evidence that would suggest she was cheating. The sense of unease within me resulted from various small incidents accumulating, leaving me with an unsettling feeling. While I sensed something was amiss, I couldn't identify it precisely. Although I was fairly certain that something was happening, I lacked proof and details regarding who, what, or where it might be occurring. Doubts about my own sanity surfaced, questioning whether I was overreacting or imagining scenarios of her infidelity. Despite my uncertainty, my gut was in turmoil, indicating that something indeed was going on. It could be the early stages of a fling or affair, perhaps a one-time occurrence. Strangely, the more I dwelled on these thoughts, the more convinced I became. I'd been grappling with these concerns for what felt like weeks. But how long had the situation been unfolding before I became slightly aware that something was wrong? I took another sip of my JD, signaling the bartender, who nodded with a half-smile, having seen that troubled look many times before. Surveying the quiet bar filled with indistinct chatter, I noticed a lack of joy. The patrons had bland, unremarkable faces, all nondescript and average. The only woman in the place, in her 40s, possibly overdressed for the time and place, seemed a bit desperate, receiving drinks from an older guy. He appeared hopeful, though looking at her, he didn't need to try so hard, she already had his number. Other patrons were merely passing time while the rain outside fell, further dampening spirits. Soon, each would run out of reasons to stay in the sanctity of the bar and head homeward. I remained undecided about my course of action. I turned towards the voice, and there she was, looking at me with eyes that seemed to peer into my soul. As I attempted to respond, words eluded me. In the dimly lit bar, water dripping from her, Sammy started to remove her coat, and I questioned her presence. Curious, I asked why she was here. Sammy explained that she was worried about me, sensing that she would find me at the bar. She suggested we talk. I stared at her, wondering about her motives. Could I trust her? To steady myself, I took a sip of my JD and ordered her a vodka and soda. We waited for the bartender to move away before resuming our conversation, our eyes conveying uncertainty and a subtle struggle for dominance. Sammy pointed out that my recent behavior had caught her attention, sensing that I carried the weight of the world on my shoulders. I looked into her brown eyes but quickly averted my gaze. There was an unspoken understanding between us. I assured her that everything was okay between us, attempting to downplay the situation. However, she wasn't convinced. My heart sank as I realized my attempts to minimize the issue were futile. Placing her glass on the table, Sammy locked her fingers together, leaning slightly forward. She told me she knew what was going on. Confused, I feigned ignorance, but Sammy insisted. We moved to a booth for privacy, reluctantly agreeing. I asked her what she thought she knew, attempting to deflect the conversation. Sammy saw through my bluff, asserting that I couldn't lie to her after our long history. She encouraged me to talk, insisting that I needed someone to confide in. I'd known Sammy since she was 17. She was a constant presence and harbored a crush on me when I initially dated her sister Claire, who was 3 years older. Despite their differences, Sammy and I always got along, occasionally leading to sibling clashes with Claire. Over the years, Claire and I married after 2 years and settled into what I perceived as an ideal future. Both working in decent jobs, we earned enough for a comfortable life. Sammy, my sister-in-law, had enjoyed her late teens and early 22s and, at 25, sought a more mature phase in life. She had matured into someone any guy would be fortunate to be close to. Claire and I had been married for 5 years, with our anniversary due in another month. Contemplating whether we would make it that far, Sammy, an attractive woman and a friend besides my sister-in-law, looked at me with my eyes filling. Struggling to articulate my emotions while her resounding "I know" echoed in my mind. Sammy reached across the table, offering support. As her fingers gently stroked mine, I felt my heart slowly breaking. As she spoke, she mentioned that if I wouldn't say it, she believed she knew that Claire was cheating on me. Despite the shock of her words, I stubbornly tried to process what I knew and its implications. I resisted hearing more, convincing myself that if I didn't acknowledge it, it couldn't be happening, sparing me from the pain of confronting the truth. Sammy noticed my glassy-eyed expression and questioned whether it was shock or denial. She expressed her love for me and urged me to wake up, suggesting that it might be a misunderstanding. In response, I attempted to deflect her and continued deceiving myself. Sammy's eyes flashed with rage, and she exclaimed, drawing the bartender's attention. I assured the bartender that everything was fine. Sammy apologized, expressing her frustration with me and emphasizing her concern for my well-being. She urged me to wise up and face the reality of the situation, emphasizing that we needed to take action. I agreed to start, and Sammy shared her suspicions. She recounted an incident from a few weeks ago when she was with my partner and she received a call on her mobile. Sammy found it peculiar that Claire left the room to take the call, considering they were sisters. I nodded, feeling a sense of dread. Continuing her story, Sammy revealed that she checked Claire's phone, discovering there was no lock code. The call was from a guy, saved as Robert. Sammy didn't know any Robert or Bob but decided to monitor for any recurrence. I asked about the identity of this Robert or Bob guy, seeking clarification. After about a week, Sammy discovered the identity of the guy my partner had been messaging. He was someone she knew from years ago, before our relationship began. Apparently, they reconnected through social media or chat sites, and their messaging had been going on for a few weeks. I admitted that I had no knowledge of these interactions, only sensing that there were small things keeping us apart. Sammy acknowledged this but explained that it was all part of what they were doing, nothing overt, but it seemed like things were falling into place for them. Curious, I asked if it was just a couple of friends messaging each other, perhaps reminiscing about old times. Sammy confirmed that it started that way but hinted that something had changed. I was surprised and asked if I hadn't noticed anything suspicious. I mentioned that it felt like circumstances were conspiring to keep us apart, and there was an obvious lack of opportunity for any fun, too. Sammy stared at me incredulously, expressing a sense of disbelief. I returned her gaze, awaiting her next words. She urged me to pull my head out of the metaphorical sand, emphasizing her love for me. In response, I questioned the extent of the situation, seeking to understand how far it had gone. Sammy met my gaze, and her eyes briefly flickered, providing an unspoken confirmation. My anger began to simmer within me, prompting a quick barrage of questions about when, how, and where these encounters had taken place. Sammy shared that she knew my partner had met the other guy at least 3 times over the past 2 weeks. Initially unsure, Sammy only became certain 2 days ago that the situation had progressed. She had a lunch with one of her friends who worked with Claire, and some information slipped out during their conversation. Sammy discovered that Claire had met the guy twice for lunch and at least once for dinner the previous week. She asked if this aligned with what I had observed or suspected. I looked at her as I took in her words. There were a couple of times recently when I had called her office to arrange a lunchtime meet, and she wasn't there or had just gone out. Was that when she met him? Then last week she had that seminar thing she just had to attend. It was a late notice thing and arranged for after work. She had gotten home late that night, after 12. Thinking back, she had come in saying that it had dragged on, and the team had gone for a drink in the hotel bar to unwind before leaving. No love-making that night, I remember, and she hit the shower before bed too. My mind was racing, my brain scrambled as I took in these hurtful facts. Sammy expressed concern, telling me not to do anything reckless that could lead to legal trouble. I could sense the change in her expression as I made my decision. I declared my refusal to tolerate the situation any longer and vowed to put an end to it. I affirmed that I would not accept a cheating partner and was determined to make them both pay for their actions. Sammy cautioned me, advising against impulsive actions without a plan. Her words had a strange way of helping me calm down, confirming that my suspicions were indeed true. Seeking more information, I asked if she knew where my partner might be at that moment. Sammy confirmed that she believed my partner was currently with the other guy, explaining that it was the reason she sought me out. The rage resurfaced, prompting me to pound the table. People in the bar turned to look as I signaled the bartender. I asked Sammy if she knew the exact location. Sammy explained that she didn't know the exact location, but planned to speak with my partner the next day to gather more information. She mentioned that the other guy is married with a couple of kids, though she wasn't sure about his residence. She assured me that she would try to find out more to assist in the situation. I expressed gratitude, reaching for her hand and holding it tightly as I wiped away a tear from her cheek. I thanked her for her support, acknowledging the difficulty of the situation for her. Sammy, looking worried, asked about my plans. I assured her that I couldn't act on my impulses just yet, but intended to put an end to the situation definitively. I promised there would be consequences, without remorse, for both of them. In the meantime, I planned to secure what was rightfully mine and gather evidence for my next course of action. As I finished my JD, I signaled the bartender, slipping him a note and telling him to keep the change. Sammy continued to look concerned and asked when I planned to confront my partner. I considered the situation, planning to make some calls the next day while addressing my assets. I emphasized my determination not to give her a single penny. Sammy pointed out the difficulty of being around my partner, and I acknowledged that it had been challenging for the past few weeks. I believe that if she hadn't noticed any change by now, she likely wouldn't in the future. Sammy stood up, expressing her need to leave. I offered to talk again tomorrow, and she agreed, promising to find out more for me. She put on her coat, and I stood to help her, feeling her proximity. She resembled her sister so much as she looked up at me, tears in her eyes. I kissed her cheek, reassuring her that I would be fine. She smiled and left, disappearing into the dark and wet evening. Sitting back down, I took a deep breath, contemplating my next steps. One thing was clear in my mind: they would pay, and the retaliation would be swift, relentless, and unforgiving. Update: I don't recall much after that. Somehow, I woke up in my own bed with a mouth like the bottom of a parrot's cage. My head was still swimming as I raised it off the bed. Rolling over, I noticed I was alone and there was no sign of Claire. My senses slowly awakened as I heard noises from downstairs. Sliding my feet over the side of the bed, I tried to stand. Waking up the next morning, I couldn't help but wonder about the events of the previous night. As I staggered to the bathroom, attempting to shake off the grogginess, I proceeded to rouse myself. Entering the kitchen, I found her there, inquiring about the state I was in. In response to her question, I vaguely mentioned having a drink with an old friend and getting carried away. Sitting down, I poured some orange juice, drank it, and poured another. When she probed further, asking about the friend's identity, my mind started to work. I mentioned a guy named Bob, explaining that I knew him from way back and that he was in town for a couple of days on business. At the mention of Bob, I noticed a flicker of something on her face as she turned. I elaborated, recalling our college days and football years together. Claire seemed puzzled, unable to remember Bob. Nevertheless, she brushed it off, expressing indifference as long as I had fun. It was the first warning sign. Seated across from me at the table, I thought about my conversation with Sammy the previous night. I casually inquired about her activities the night before, feigning interest. I looked into her eyes as she lied about finishing work and going for a light meal and a drink with colleagues. She claimed to be home by 9:30, expressing concern for me due to a late meeting. I knew she wasn't home by then, as I was still at home until 10 p.m., deciding to head to the bar when enough was enough. That was the second warning sign. She continued, mentioning some tasks she needed to complete in the morning and hinting at being late in the evening. Bob, an old friend, was expected to be in touch, and they had plans to catch up. I suggested inviting Bob over, emphasizing the pleasure of reconnecting with old friends. She agreed and asked if I remembered him, using an endearing term. She stared at me with a neutral expression, attempting to conceal any reaction, but I sensed something beneath the surface. Despite her poker face, I could perceive a hint of emotion. I dismissed her inquiry about inviting Bob over, assuring her that I would manage on my own. I decided to get ready for the day, having more orange juice and a couple of painkillers before leaving the house, ensuring I didn't miss the opportunity to collect my car left at the bar. 30 minutes later, I departed, while Claire continued preparing for her day. As I dressed, I contemplated the situation, my determination growing. This couldn't continue for much longer. I clenched my fists, angered by the thought of Claire with Bob, vowing revenge. I harbored intense resentment towards him. The workday proved chaotic, with a constant stream of calls, dealing with issues on the line. My secretary handled some calls, but I couldn't avoid crucial meetings. The tension within me intensified as I navigated through the day, fueled by a growing desire for retribution. By mid-morning, the initial rush eased off, and I had some almost free time to deal with my personal issues. I closed my office door and started to check out my financials. Within 15 minutes, I had tightened the purse strings and moved some cash out of reach. I also arranged a meeting with a solicitor to discuss a possible divorce. I still had a few days before that, so my thinking was that it would give me time to get more information, not that it would matter that much anyway. But it could give me some leverage. Claire had her own bank account and credit card, so there was no need to do anything there. It was access to our joint account that was of concern, but I plugged that loophole quickly, so if it came to it, she couldn't get any more than what was left. My own account was secure and only had a smallish balance. The rest was shifted out and safe. We had no children, so essentially it would be a straightforward split should it come to that. I had decided in my own mind that we could only get over this if Claire were to confess her sins, so to speak, and seek forgiveness. Any kind of reticence there, and we were done. That thought made me feel sad. I sat at my desk in silence as I mulled over what had transpired and the actions I had taken so far. Today, I needed more information on the Bob character and evidence, or would the fact that I knew about it be enough to really duck the two of them over? The phone interrupted my thoughts, and it was Sammy on the line. I shared that I was occupied with various thoughts and plans but had initiated some actions. Sammy provided additional information about the guy, Bob Stones, revealing that he was married. She had his address and workplace, obtained discreetly through her friend who had seen Claire with him. According to Sammy, they seemed to be growing closer despite attempts to conceal it. Acknowledging the start of potential evidence, I requested Bob's details from Sammy. Within minutes, I located his social media page and obtained a photo. Something about his face seemed familiar, triggering a vague memory. Despite the unsettling feeling, I decided to call Claire around lunchtime, intending to stir the container. During the call, Claire explained she had a meeting with a client named Mr. Stones, which added another layer to the situation. Suppressing my emotions, I kept the conversation casual, though her mention of Mr. Stones felt like a taunt. Strike three, I thought, determined to take swift and merciless action against both of them. Ending the call, I masked my anger, promising to see her later and enduring her declaration of love with a clenched jaw. After ending the call, my anger boiled within me. Seated there, I clenched my teeth, contemplating the unsettling revelation. My secretary appeared, poking her head into the office, offering to grab something from the deli down the street. Considering for a moment, I instructed her to surprise me with something substantial, hearty, and rich in red meat, something to sink my teeth into. She gave me a peculiar look but nodded, closing the door behind her, sensing that my behavior had been unusual all morning. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was brewing beneath the surface. Sammy visited her sister's office and noticed Claire leaving the elevator alongside a tall, dark-haired man, roughly around 30 years old, Bob Stones. The man Sammy had identified from his online photo. Stepping in front of her sister, Sammy surprised Claire, who seemed uneasy about her plans being disrupted. Sammy explained her impromptu visit, expressing a desire to see her sister and possibly go for lunch. Claire, visibly uncomfortable, mentioned that she and Mr. Stones were having a business lunch and suggested meeting another time. Mr. Stones introduced himself, and Sammy, feigning innocence, asked how long he had known Claire. The question seemed to catch him off guard, and Claire hurriedly pulled him away, citing a meeting they needed to attend. As they left the building and entered a waiting cab, Sammy smiled, observing her sister looking back at her as they drove away. I sat in my office, munching through a massive sub filled with red meat, smiling to myself as I nodded at it slowly, savoring it while contemplating my next steps. Sammy had confirmed that Claire had left her office, so she called her secretary and found out she would be out all afternoon. Well, isn't that just ducking great? Everything was set regarding my finances, and I had a locksmith on speed dial with the terms prearranged. My solicitor was primed and ready to act as soon as I provided him with the remaining information he had requested. Okay, tonight was going to be the first stage. I was going to really mess with the pair of them for a little while before I pulled the trigger. My old man always told me, don't let them know you're coming for them, just take Route 1, be direct and destroy the bastards. A man of few, if not direct, words. Maybe that was something I had forgotten recently, but it was coming. It was on its way. Update that evening at home, Claire walked in, appearing normal, and nothing seemed out of place until I detected a faint scent of men's cologne. As I went to kiss her, she noticed my reaction, and without verbalizing anything, I gave her a light kiss on the cheek and made my way to the door. Curious, she inquired about my plans, asking if everything was okay. I assured her that I was fine but had a matter to attend to. I explained that I was heading to Jerry's place for a poker game with a few colleagues from work, hoping it would be a good distraction. Closing the door behind me, I got into my car and left the driveway, grinding my teeth in frustration. Upon arriving at Jerry's, I parked outside and entered his garage. Jerry, a longtime friend with a history of dealing with the police, had combat training, making him the ideal companion for what I had in mind. He was a substantial figure, a friend since school, and I had called him earlier to seek his assistance. He readily offered his support without asking questions. This kind of unwavering support was exactly what I needed. We quickly slipped into the garage and I changed into a pair of dark overalls with a matching ski mask. We looked like two mime artists standing in silence. No words were exchanged as we got into a nondescript, second-hand car. Jerry had obtained nothing remarkable or noticeable about it. Cruising slowly across town to the address Sammy had given me, still no words passed between us. We had agreed on the format before, so there was no need for further discussion. Jerry parked the car outside Bob Stones' home, and there was no sign of life, with just one visible light. We waited in silence. As the front door opened, we saw him step out, get into his car, and ease down the road. Jerry followed at a safe distance. We already knew his destination, so there was no rush or panic. Parking at the driving range posed no problem, and we stayed in the car. The radio played in the background as we sat, watching and waiting. The tension inside me was almost unbearable, making it challenging to stay still. The urge to step out and walk around was strong, but we knew it was risky. Gradually, the car park emptied until only a couple of other cars remained. Both of us tensed as we observed him making his way to his car. Jerry got out and stealthily approached the target. Afterwards, I drove us out of the car park quietly, without drawing attention. Jerry remarked on the success of the operation as he removed his gloves and mask. I expressed gratitude, acknowledging that I appreciated his assistance. Jerry assured me not to worry, stating that he owed me and could never fully repay me for what I had done for him. I reminded him that friends help each other and pointed out that at least his hands weren't injured, and there was no CCTV in the car park. We considered the job well done. Deciding to head back, Jerry suggested starting a card game with the others, who would be there by now. We drove back, spending the next 4 hours playing poker for fun. The atmosphere among the guys was positive, and they understood the situation, providing the support I needed, boosting my confidence for the upcoming confrontation with Claire. However, before addressing the main issue, I planned to play some mind games with her. I stumbled through the door just after 1 a.m., intentionally exaggerating the amount I had to drink. Jerry had arranged for one of the guys to drop off my car. Claire, waiting up, questioned my lateness and examined me closely. I dismissed her concern, mentioning that Jerry and the guys had dropped me off in my car, admitting to having a bit too much JD. Disregarding my jacket and missing the coat pegs, I slumped onto the sofa and looked at her. Claire, with crossed arms and a disgusted expression, sat there. I maintained a blank expression, waiting for her to speak. She couldn't hold back and finally asked, "What is going on, Steve? Is there someone else or something? You're acting really weird lately." I chuckled, suppressing the anger building within me, reminding myself to take it easy. "I'm all right, my petal. Just been through a rough patch recently. It'll all be over soon." My words lingered in Claire's mind, leaving her unsure but sensing something amiss. We went to bed, and I pretended to collapse, feigning immediate sleep. It irked her, as she seemed ready for a confrontation, but I refused to engage. The following morning, Claire was the first to rise, making coffee. I descended the stairs, acting obnoxious, pretending to have a hangover. Playfully entering the kitchen, I greeted her and mentioned my throbbing head. She tossed a headache remedy my way. As I sipped my coffee, she appeared subdued, and I noticed her phone on the kitchen table. Wondering if she had received any calls, Claire noticed my gaze on her phone, and I could sense her desire to reach for it, although doing so would seem odd. Pouring more orange juice, I casually picked up the phone. A look of panic flashed across her face as I intercepted a message. I briefly glanced at it before sliding the phone back to her, stating that it needed charging to avoid a flat battery and any missed messages. Leaving the kitchen, I went to get dressed, leaving Claire looking after me with a sense that something was amiss. She wondered if I could know, dismissing the thought as she believed she had been careful. Their involvement had only been going on for a few weeks' lunches, dinner 3 times, and hotel stays 3 times. She considered it nothing more than fun, confident that I would never find out, especially since I wasn't going without. The revelation led her to contemplate her recent intimacy with her husband, unable to recall the last time. She pondered if her neglect might have contributed to my suspicions. Hastily descending the stairs, I swiftly exited the door, sidestepping Claire's attempt for a more passionate farewell. Waving and smiling, I pulled out of the driveway and headed to work. Around 11 a.m., I decided to send Claire a text for amusement, expressing regrets for the day and explaining that there was a lot on my mind, assuring her it would soon be resolved. I settled back, awaiting a reaction. Later in the day, Sammy visited me, inquiring about what had happened. I questioned Sammy about her earlier statement, asking her what she meant. Earlier in the day, an employee from the golf club had found Bob stones in the trunk of his car, badly beaten. Claire had informed Sammy, and she was shaken. Sammy asked if I had done it, and I responded that I didn't care too much either way, denying any involvement. I went on to mention that Claire had told me she found out about Bob's condition through a scheduled meeting with him. His company had called, stating he was in the hospital and his wife had called them. Sammy found my explanation cute and plausible, but suggested that maybe next time it wouldn't be so easy for them. I was asked about my cryptic remark, and I replied, saying that accidents happen in the strangest places. That night, upon arriving home, Claire was absent, and her car was gone. There was no message. Irritated, I called her phone, cheerfully inquiring about her whereabouts. She responded, explaining that she was at the hospital visiting a friend, assuring me it wouldn't be long. I expressed my hope for her friend's swift recovery, bid her goodbye, and hung up before she could respond. 30 minutes later, she returned, looking drained. I asked about her friend's condition, expressing my hope that it wasn't too serious. Claire hesitated before responding, mentioning that it was nothing too dramatic. Her friend had just fallen and would be home in a few days. I suggested coffee, and she accepted, thanking me. While sipping her coffee, Claire brought up an incident at her workplace, mentioning that one of her company's reps had been assaulted the other night. I reacted with surprise, asking for details. She explained that he was attacked and left in his car overnight, but reassured me that he was okay. Bob wasn't hurt too badly, and it seemed like they wanted to mess him up for no reason. Nothing was stolen or anything. I couldn't help but think about the contradiction, given my prior denial of knowing Bob. Update: she noticed me looking at her and realized she had made a mistake. She tried to cover it up, but she knew it was too late. Now he was aware of the situation as well. Quickly, she hurried to make an exit to change. I suspected she would be on the phone any second, but to whom? I decided I needed to reassess my plan. Since things were escalating, I had to move things forward a bit. Calling upstairs to Claire, I informed her I needed to go out for a little while, reassuring her I wouldn't be long. I drove to Bob Stone's home address and knocked on the door. A petite, dark-haired woman opened the door. I explained that I was Steve Ryland, and my wife, Claire Ryland, had dealings with her husband. She looked at me nervously, yet intrigued. I requested to come in for a moment. In the lounge, she realized the gravity of the situation as I mentioned the affair between Claire and her husband. I expressed my regret for having to break the news and informed her that he was currently in the hospital. She folded inwardly, tears flowing for a few seconds, expressing her suspicions. She mentioned that she knew he was at it again and decided to divorce him. She felt that Claire had enough chances to come clean and the lies were unbearable. Unsure of how long the affair had been going on, she was convinced of Claire's betrayal. When I inquired about the incident the other night, she admitted uncertainty. I clarified that I didn't lay a finger on him and expressed my shock at the situation, indicating my lack of concern about whoever damaged him. I mentioned that I couldn't be sorry about it. I questioned if he might have been involved with another man's wife, to which she responded, "Nothing surprises me." She decided to keep him out of her life, emphasizing that they had moved back to the area because he was fooling around before. Before leaving, I provided her with my locksmith's and solicitor's contact information. Realizing the complexity of the situation as I drove slowly home, I focused on dealing with the other half of my problem. My inner rage was under control, understanding that once retribution began, it would run its course of action I would follow and relish for the most part. The end of my marriage saddened me, but I knew there was no going back from her betrayal. My one consolation was that the parties that caused me pain would experience it in far greater measure. I do not forgive. Update: I guided my car onto the driveway, noticing Claire's car exactly where she had left it just a couple of hours ago. Absent-mindedly tapping the bonnet as I passed, I approached my front door and slid my key into the lock. A heavy feeling settled in my heart, realizing this might be the last time I do this as a married man. Stepping inside, the weight of the recent worries pressed on my shoulders, making them incredibly heavy as I slowly moved towards the lounge. The murmur of the television greeted me as I neared the doorway. There, perched on the sofa, was Claire, her demeanor radiating fear and trepidation. A sense that something was amiss hung in the air, as if the game was up without a word being spoken. Nervously, she shook, trying to maintain composure. I stood silently watching her, and as our eyes met, I saw fear and attempt to speak, but nothing escaped her lips. Walking into the room, I passed her to fix myself a drink, remaining silent. I reached for my drink, my unblinking eyes locked onto hers. She waited, sensing something was amiss. My expression remained impassive as I observed the woman I had deeply loved, now balancing those feelings with the pain she had needlessly caused me. It was time for her to feel my pain. As I stared, she detected no reason for optimism in my face. Pulling herself together, Claire straightened up, deciding to brazen it out. Unaware of what I knew, she couldn't endure the incriminating silence any longer. She asked where I had been, and frustration crept into her voice at my silent treatment. I responded, saying that I would tell her where I went if she told me where she had been. Uncertainty flickered in her eyes as she insisted she was at the hospital visiting a friend. I maintained a blank expression and fear flashed across her eyes. She was rattled. Once again, she deflected the question back to me, thinking she had skillfully batted it away. I told her to stop the nonsense and explained that I visited a friend myself, someone I hadn't known for long. Our conversation was crucial, and although I hadn't met her before, we were now friends of sorts. I had an enlightening talk with her about her husband, Bob Stone's, asking if she had heard of him. Her face flushed as I toyed with her emotions. I explained that I needed to talk to the Stones woman about her husband's infidelity, having discovered his affair. In response to my revelation, she offered concern, asking if I was okay and offering to get me a drink. I inquired about her knowledge of Bob Stone's affairs, watching her struggle to find words. I took the lead, telling her that I knew about her involvement with Bob and had known for a while. I challenged her to speak up before leaving, emphasizing that it didn't mean anything and was just closeness. I scoffed at her excuses, reminding her of the vows we both took. As she continued to defend herself, I called her out, expressing my frustration with her lies. I pointed out that she treated me like a fool, and her attempts to downplay the affair infuriated me. I sarcastically commented on the claim that it only happened twice, and questioned whether it was worth our marriage. She apologized, claiming it didn't mean anything, and expressing a willingness to make it up to me. I laughed bitterly, accusing her of being sorry for getting caught and questioning whether she would have stopped if not exposed. I asserted that all the lies she told had become second nature, and only she believed them. I told her that she was not the woman I fell in love with and married. She looked at me as the weight of my hurt started to penetrate her cheater's facade. She realized the seriousness of the situation and asked what she could do, promising to do anything. I informed her that we were done and called Sammy, letting her know about the situation. Sammy would be arriving shortly to pick her up. Claire, shocked, asked where she would go, and I responded harshly, saying she could go wherever she liked, even back to the hospital to see her boyfriend. He didn't care. We were done. Claire sat stunned as there was a knock on the door. I greeted Sammy and told her to get Claire out of here. I explained that if she didn't leave, I was afraid of what I might do to her. Despite hating what she had done, I still cared about her, but it was time for her to go. Sammy hurriedly gathered Claire's things for the next few days. I thanked Sammy for her assistance and mentioned that I would be in contact soon. As Sammy prepared Claire to leave, I listened to the sound of my wife sobbing. Sammy swiftly packed Claire's belongings into a couple of suitcases, and in less than 10 minutes she was removed from my home. The real challenge would be to get her out of my life permanently and erase the pain. Retribution would help with that. Staring into the flames of the pyre I had built in the backyard, I watched everything of Claire's go up in flames. There was no way I would allow her back into my house for anything.